Welcome into another edition of MPW Digital Extra presented by Rustic Revival's Furniture Company. I'm Neil McCready. On this episode of the show, we talk to a trio of guests. Michael Bratton of That SEC Podcast, Deacons Illustrated.com, Connor O'Neill, who covers Wake Forest, and then our weekly visit with Barstool Sports, Ben Mintz. Go in depth with Michael for about an hour on all things SEC. I mean, we jump all over the league, including his thoughts on Ole Miss so far through two games as the Rebels get ready to go play in Winston-Salem. Speaking of Winston-Salem, we go pretty in-depth on the game Saturday night in Winston-Salem, 6:30 Eastern, 5:30 Central. We'll talk to Connor about the Demon Deacons. They're 1-1 after blowing a 2-score lead last weekend at home against Virginia. And then, of course, we go over all of the betting lines. Week 2 in the NFL, week 3 in college football with our friend Ben Mintz. It's all brought to you by Rustic Revivals. Based out of Flowood, Mississippi, Rustic Revivals builds table and other furniture by hand with locally sourced lumber. The husband and wife team of Josh and Ashley Pierce specialize in custom-ordered tables, beds, dressers, coffee tables, bookshelves, decorative cabinets, and chairs. They have a limited selection of ready-for-pickup pieces available in their shop. They deliver within 250 miles of Flowood, and all pieces are sealed for protection. Podcast listeners can take 10% off their purchase by using the code Rebels10. The QR code right there in the stream on the box on the side. Scan that and then go to rusticrevivalsms.com. You can check them out on Facebook at Rustic Revivals MS. Rustic Revivals on Instagram. You can also order directly by calling 228-217-1243. I'm coming to you from the Clark Ford Studios. Clark Ford's in Amory, Mississippi, 662-257-1900. Call that number. Ask for Corey Clark. Tell Corey what Ford product you're looking for, and he'll get you a quote. You can take that quote, do with it as you will. You can shop it around, of course, if you'd like, or you can do what I've done, what I really highly recommend that you do, and that is hop into a Clark Ford today. Corey's been my car guy, my truck guy for, 10 years now. He'll build a great relationship with you. They'll take great care of you. He'll do it with you as well. 662-257-1900. All of the guests that I mentioned above will join on the Campbell Clinic hotline. From fractures and sports injuries to complex spine and limb conditions, the pediatric orthopedic physicians at Campbell Clinic Oxford are the only specialized pediatric orthopedic team in North Mississippi providing expert care for growing bodies. Visit campbellclinicoxford.com to schedule an appointment or call 901-759-3111. And before we get to our guest, you know what I've got to talk to you about, because you've had Wendy's nugs dipped in sauce. Have you had them covered in sauce? Wendy's new spicy nugs, saucy spicy nugs, take the crispy and spicy nugs you love and turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo, honey barbecue, garlic parm, or if you're a real heat seeker, try spicy ghost pepper only on Wendy's signature nugs. I dare you. That's 7 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. So pick a flavor, grab some extra napkins, and prepare to nug like you have never ever nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's at participating U.S. Wendy's. So now we go to the Campbell Clinic hotline, and we take a visit with our friend Michael Bratton of That SEC Podcast. I think you'll like this a lot. The great Michael Bratton of That SEC Podcast, kind enough to join. If you haven't not listened to, watched his podcast, you really should. It's really good stuff. They're very entertaining. Appreciate you being with us.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just telling you, it's always an honor, Neil, to be on your show. You're one of the most respected voices in this game here. And anytime. This is a real treat for me.
All right. I know we're only 2 weeks. First, thank you very much. That's very kind of you to say. We're 2 weeks in. We don't know a whole lot about everybody, right? Because some people, like the team that I cover week in and week out, Ole Miss, they haven't played anybody. I think Ole Miss is really good. But, it's been Furman, Middle Tennessee. It's like, well, you can't pass the test until you get a test, right? And they haven't been tested. I am curious, we'll start there. Most of my audience is Ole Miss fans, obviously. What have you thought, if anything, of Ole Miss so far?
that they've been dominant, and that's exactly what you wanted to see with the competition as you laid out. They've not been tested, and they may not be tested for several more weeks based on some of these teams that they got coming out the gate. But that's what you want to see, and every team in this conference has games like this. So I don't dock Ole Miss for it, but to your point, you don't get a super great read on them, but that's all I want to see. Because, again, South Carolina didn't dominate Old Dominion, and they probably should have, right? So Jackson Dart has looked phenomenal, even better than, and he's been very good. He's looked even better, I thought, than he ever has before. I think the additions on the defensive side via the portal have looked exactly what you thought you were getting. And I told you at media days, I thought this could be the best 1-2 receiver combo in the SEC. And again, it's 2 weeks, but so far it looks like it to me.
Yeah, you did. You were big on the Juice Wells thing, and I was just kind of cautious because he didn't do anything in the spring, and you didn't know what his health was. And the first few weeks of preseason camp, I was like, well, he's not doing much. He was in a black no contact jersey, and he was a lot of times we'd go out to the practice, the little opportunity that we had, and he's on a bike or he's whatever. He's not really with the team. And I'm like, well, we've kind of seen this before with Zachary Franklin a year ago, and guys that had been hyped up that it really didn't happen. And then boom, week 1, he's on the field making plays. And you're like, well, maybe so. Cause he's awfully talented, and Trey Harris is off to a great start. And they've got the 2 really good tight ends. They've got Caden Lee's off to a great start in the slot. Jordan Watkins just came back, had 1 catch against Middle, but made a big block on a touchdown run, and we all sort of know what he can do. And you start going, man, there's a bunch of weapons. And then you get to the running game, and there's no Quinshon Judkins, but Henry Parrish Jr. has been a big surprise so far. They've gotten a lot out of Matt Jones, and you're right, man. I mean, Jackson Dart has, in a league full of good quarterbacks, Jackson Dart's been terrific. I mean, he's played at a level, and again, it's the caveat that you keep throwing out to the point of it's almost ad nauseum. Yes, it's Furman, it's Middle Tennessee, right? But that's who he's played against, and he's just lit them up. And like Lane Kiffin said, 26 straight completions. It's hard to do against air because people drop balls, I mean, it happens, and he goes 26 or 30 straight completions over 2 games. He's looked just fantastic.
And the one unit, I mean, I don't disagree with anything you just said, but the one unit that you didn't really hit on too much is the offensive line. And I think the physicality has been there, exactly what you want to see. And again, obviously, we just keep repeating ourselves. The competition's not what you will be seeing, but that's what you have to see with new pieces on that offensive line. I mean, hell, Neil, I know this is a completely different team and everything. You can't necessarily compare it, but all I heard from Oklahoma fans all offseason is we got the greatest offensive line, Coach Bill, beating Bow, whatever, and they look awful, and again, that's not the situation Ole Miss is in, but I wanted to see them be physically dominant, and they have been through the first 2 weeks, and that's making the whole thing go.
I like to do these sort of things without planning how I'm going to do them because it makes it more organic. And I did it this way intentionally. I didn't have a plan. And when I first started with you, I was like, I really should have written some things down, but I'm glad I didn't because I'm going to go here with challenges, right? Ole Miss gets Wake Forest in Winston-Salem on Saturday. They get Georgia Southern next Saturday in Oxford. And then after that, it's 8 SEC games in 10 weeks. So I'm going to name them. And Michael, stop me when you tell me that's the challenge. Kentucky at home, at South Carolina, at LSU, Oklahoma at home, at Arkansas, Georgia.
Maybe Arkansas. Again, this is weird to say, but they gave that game away. I think Arkansas is significantly better than many people anticipated in the preseason. So that's one. And obviously Georgia's on another planet, but sure. I think that Arkansas could be a real test as long as, they blew that game the other day and you're seeing all the hatred is too strong a word, but the angst among the Razorback Nation. I mean, it comes out immediately, as it should. I mean, that was, again, they gave that one away. There was poor coaching, but it's not on Sam Pittman that they had a pick six. It's not on Sam Pittman that they're dropping fumbles. It's not on Sam Pittman that one of their linebackers suplexed a guy in overtime when they got to stop. You know what I mean?
That was a huge play in that game. I mean, if he doesn't do that, it's 3rd and 11 for Oklahoma State, and maybe you get a stop, you force a field goal, maybe they miss a field goal. You have a chance to go win the football game right there, and they gave it away on that play. It was a terrible mistake. Yeah, Pittman's never been a great game coach. I don't think he's suddenly going to become a great game coach. But I'm with you. Arkansas suddenly is interesting a little bit. And I'm interested in, we'll go back to Kentucky and South Carolina and all that, but I kind of agree with you. I'm like, before the season, hell, a week ago, I was like, man, that Kentucky game in Oxford, that's going to be really interesting. And now I'm like, that's not going to be very interesting.
Right. And it can change so drastically, Neil, because we've only got two weeks of data here. And exactly to what you just said, I mean, South Carolina now looks tougher. I thought South Carolina may be the worst team in the damn league a week ago. That they should have not only lost to Old Dominion, Neil, they should have got blown out by them.
Yeah.
Blown out at home. Yet their defense basically gave them 14 points and really 21, because they picked off Old Dominion in the end zone as well. So that's a 21-point swing by their defense. Their offense was just dreadful in that opener. So
they look like a team playing with the first-time quarterback. Now I thought he looked Sellers. I thought he looked a lot better against Kentucky, and Kentucky looked completely out of sorts. It was really interesting because I'm covering at the exact same time I'm watching Ole Miss and Middle Tennessee, and I'm trying to do my job and take notes and that kind of stuff. But it's as it unfolds, Ole Miss is getting a little bored. You're watching other stuff on your screen. And every time I would kind of, for lack of a better term, flip to Kentucky, South Carolina, the score's worse. And I'm like, what in the living hell? And you kind of go back and look at some of it, and Kentucky just didn't show up for a home SEC opener. And Carolina, to their credit, and I'm with you, I was like, hey, Carolina sucks, man. And then they played really inspired football, played well, and I thought they had a better plan for Sellers in week 2 and put him in positions to have success. But at least at this point, he does appear to be a pretty one-dimensional, and that one dimension is very good. He's very athletic, but a one-dimensional kind of quarterback. And so I don't know, are they beating Ole Miss? I don't think so. And so then I go to LSU, and I mean, this is hot take after 2 weeks, and I get it, and that's what we do after 2 weeks. We do hot takes. LSU just doesn't look the part. All the people that told me, and I was big on LSU in the offseason, that I was really underselling how much they lost in Daniels and the 2 receivers and just in general, and that, hey, defensively they're going to be better, but it's hard to improve that much. They're all right, and I appear to be wrong. I mean, the LSU doesn't look great, and Oklahoma doesn't look good at all because of what you said. They can't block anybody. It's a young quarterback. I do think he's talented. I think they're good on the defensive side. But to beat Ole Miss, from what I've seen so far, I think you're going to have to be a multi-dimensional team that can run the football, that can throw the football, that can rush the passer, that can protect. You've got to be a good team. I mean, obviously, like you said, Georgia's on a different planet. But everybody else, some of the games that I had circled as like, that's a game they could lose. Suddenly I'm like, well, I mean, they still could lose because it's college football and it's the SEC, but it's not nearly as likely as I would have maybe said it was when you and I last talked in late July in Dallas.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, this is kind of what I thought LSU would be. I voted them 9th in the media poll. Now, you add Texas and Oklahoma, it obviously changes things, and we don't have the division, so that makes it sound like I was thinking they were going to miss a bowl game. But no, in this conference, you could be 9th and still be like 8-4, 7-5. But I don't know if you heard this the other day, and it's kind of weird for me to just be bringing up another person's opinion, but very respected Bruce Feldman from Athletic and Fox Sports and all that. He said if Brian Kelly goes 7-5, they're going to fire him. And he said this after the Southern Cal loss. And I'm sitting there saying, really? I mean, but if they lose to South Carolina, I don't think that's outlandish that they go 7-5. Now I have no clue if they fire Brian Kelly over that, but the path to LSU going to 7-5 is there if they drop this game. So this is a huge game this weekend.
Easy. I mean, look, let's for kicks and giggles, and we'll talk about Carolina and LSU next because they play on Saturday, the early game in Columbia. Game day is going to be there, the whole shooting match. After that, LSU has UCLA, South Alabama, so a couple of wins. Open date. Then they have what I think is a brutal stretch for them. Brutal. Ole Miss at home. They got to go to Arkansas. We'll talk about Arkansas again in a minute, but I kind of agree with you about Arkansas. And like at Arkansas, no one's expecting a title, so they can keep in it engaged around the 500 mark, right? They can still be like, hey, we're still playing for something. We're still trying to get something going, blah, blah, blah. LSU we're going to make the playoff. If they lose to Ole Miss after losing to Carolina, the playoff is completely gone. I mean, you're not making it at that point. I think they could lose in Fayetteville. I think they could lose in College Station. They could lose to Alabama at home, and then they finish at Florida, Vanderbilt, Oklahoma. I mean, once you're checked out, anything's on the table.
Right, and I had no idea. I don't know if you're aware of this either, but and who knows if this actually filters down to the players. I would imagine it really doesn't. But Oklahoma hates LSU. I guess that there's a reason they made that on rivalry weekend. Obviously, Oklahoma loses the state matchup, but I've made the trip to Norman. I mean, that's other than Texas, that's the one. It's seemingly Oklahoma fans hate the most. I didn't realize that was even a thing, but there's been several bowl matchups and things of that nature. So that is not a given, even though it is in Tiger Stadium. I think there's going to be a lot of Oklahoma fans make that trip for the first showdown as conference opponents there.
Yeah, it's one of the things like we're on the cusp of maybe seeing this with Florida State, for example. In this NIL era, when you put a team together with a bunch of portal guys and you do different things and everything's about money. When everything's about money, that is different. And you tell people, hey, this is going to be a title team. We're going to make the playoff. We're all shooting for the playoff. Everything is playoff or bust. Well, when the bust kicks in September or October, it's really hard for those teams to stay motivated into November when suddenly you're not playing for that anymore. You're not, and it's not like a baseball team that's out of the pennant race, right? That they call up a bunch of kids and the kids are like playing for jobs next year and to impress and stuff like that. And sometimes those teams end up being really pesky. You don't have like a minor league team to bring up. You got the same damn team. And guys start going, I'm out, man. I'm mentally, I'm checked out. I don't want to get hurt. I'm going to get back in the portal. I'm going to go to school. I should have gone. Hey, I went to LSU. I should have gone to Auburn. Someone call Auburn and see if they're still interested. Oh, Florida's interested. Hey, where's this coach going? All that stuff happens and it becomes a distraction. And you're not a real focused team. You're not particularly locked in. Your fans are pissed off. They didn't get their money's worth. And all of a sudden, you're really susceptible to go from, hey, we thought we were going to be a 10-2 team to suddenly you're a 7-5, 6-6 team. I think, I don't know it. I think that's going to become a thing in this era because I don't know that you're going to get teams motivated like in the old days to, hey, we can still go 8-4, 9-3, go to one of those Florida bowl games. No. The big NIL guys, they're not going to the what used to be the Outback Bowl. They're not playing in that game. They're not going to the Jacksonville, whatever, Tax Slayer Bowl. They're not playing in it. They're opting out. They're going to be in the portal. They're going to be planning their portal visits. That era is changing, and that's why I'm really watching Florida State. Some of these teams that have early L's, when they pile the L's and get to a point where everybody, all the talking heads go, well, they can't make it now. Once you can't make it now, then what are you playing for? And to me, like LSU's sort of on that list if Saturday goes bad. I'm really fascinated to see Saturday in Columbia because obviously Ole Miss goes there in a couple of weeks. And if South Carolina's on a roll, if they beat LSU, who do they have after that? It's you think I'd have my trusty little schedule memorized by now. They get LSU, then they get Akron, then they get an open day. God, if they beat LSU, man, that place will be hopping when Ole Miss comes in there in a couple of weeks, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm really fascinated to see that game. How do you sort of anticipate LSU at South Carolina shaking out?
Well, again, I said I'm down on LSU, but because we only have 2 data points to go from, I mean, I'm left scratching my head saying maybe it's Kentucky. Are they just that awful? Because I think you can make the case South Carolina outside of their defense, and particularly the defensive line, they didn't even play that well against Kentucky, and they beat them 31-6. So, again, yeah, your point, I think Dow Loggins, let's give him credit. I still am wondering, their offensive coordinator, if that was a good hire or not. But he did a remarkable turnaround from week 1 to week 2, going on the road in a game where literally everybody expected Kentucky to win. So, I'll give him credit for that. But this is a completely different story because LSU has actually got an offensive line as opposed to Kentucky, which apparently doesn't have one. So, I mean, it's going to be a terrific matchup. LSU offensive line, South Carolina defensive line. That may be the best matchup in the conference this weekend. LSU's top 10 pass efficiency in the country. South Carolina's top 5 in pass defense efficiency. So strength on strength there. But LSU is, I believe, 120th in pass defense, and South Carolina is like 105th in pass offense. So it's weakness on weakness too. So there's a lot of great matchups in this, but I still think I would give the coaching edge to LSU, and by a wide margin. That's why I think it'll be such an indictment if Brian Kelly loses this game. And, to go on a step further, and Beamer's well aware of this. He mentioned it today in his press conference, but the defensive coordinator for LSU, he was at Missouri the last 2 years, and they just pistol whipped Missouri did South Carolina's offense. So he knows how to scheme up, how to stop South Carolina. So that I'm kind of leaning towards LSU in this one.
Yeah, I think I am too, but it is absolutely intriguing because the South Carolina win it's a giant, like dropping a bomb into the middle of the SEC race a little bit. Florida and Texas A&M in Gainesville. It's a loser. I mean, are you a professional wrestling guy? When I was a kid, I loved professional wrestling, and the thought of like a loser leaves town match. The only thing better than a loser leaves town match was when the guy wearing a mask got his mask pulled off his head, and you're like, oh my God, who is it? Even though it's just a dude. You're like, as a kid,
well, I think in this matchup, that's DJ Lagway, right?
Yeah. So what do you make of Aggies at Gators? I mean, because it's another big game. The loser of this game is going to have a really difficult time sort of figuring out a way to spin anything in a positive direction moving forward.
Right. But 3 games into a coaching career, maybe too early to fire a coach, but some Aggies may want to do it to Mike Elko if he drops this one too. But yeah, I mean, this is intriguing because you just don't know what Florida's going to do at quarterback. Sounds like they're going to stick with Graham Mertz, but it seems like they got to play DJ Lagway, right? Because Mertz he's solid, but there's a ceiling there. Whereas Lagway, it's only one game against a weak opponent, but with his recruiting hype and all that, I mean, he could be one of the best or most talented quarterbacks in this conference. So, and their schedule, it's so redundant to talk about Florida's schedule, but it's a murderer's row at the back end. So what are you saving him for? This is actually the time to play him, to get him ready if you're going to make that switch. And I don't think Billy Napier works this way, but I think the only way to save his job is to play the freshman and show, there's some optimism here. Otherwise, you're beating your head against the wall. And I don't know. It's just such a tricky spot to be in, because what if Mertz even plays well, but they lose? There's still going to be fans mad that he didn't play the freshman, that we could have won if we played the freshman, So he's in such a terrible spot. This is that loser leaves town is a great way to put it. This is at least A&M's got a good defense. That's about the only thing I'm certain of going into this matchup.
Yeah. I spent the offseason saying I really liked Connor Wegman, and then I watched one small segment of a show on College Game Day, and I was like, oh, I don't like him anymore. And then he was bad against Notre Dame, and I'm like, see, I'm completely out, which is terrible that you let one day completely change your mind, but it did. And
yeah, that magic blew his mind, didn't it?
Well, it was just the way he responded to it. It was like, there's no charisma at all. And so you got to be the guy that's the leader of your team. And, I look, the program I cover right now has a guy that is incredibly charismatic at quarterback. And you can see how guys follow him and they listen to him. And I was watching Wegman that day and going, all right, he doesn't have the same impact on his teammates. And it's a weird deal for A&M because if A&M loses this game, I need to just hold the schedule. One of these days I'm going to memorize it. They get Bowling Green. That's a win. Then they get the weird Arkansas game. We'll probably talk about the Hogs again in a minute. They get Missouri at home. Still got LSU. Still got Auburn, Texas. I mean, it's we thought it was an easy schedule for them, but that was all predicated on you beat Notre Dame. Well, they didn't beat Notre Dame. And so now a lot of that gets thrown out the window, and they didn't look like world beaters. In fact, I mean, if I were ranking teams, if you told me just based on what I saw, not results, just what I saw, I'd have A&M behind a lot of teams just on what I've seen from them.
Right. And I'm afraid if I'm an Aggie, again, I'm kind of kidding about firing the coach because I think A&M will be better by the end of the season. For whatever that's worth. I mean, these are winnable games, though, that they're potentially losing. But I'm afraid Wigman does not fit this offense. And he may need to hit the portal. You know what I mean? Like, that's what it's looking like after, I admittedly only just one data point, but we'll see this Saturday because Florida does not have a good defense. We just saw Miami go in there, and I realize A&M's not Miami, but they just went up and down the field on them.
Yeah.
So if we can't get to, say, 24, 28 points on this defense, we got a real problem. And it may be time to go to a more mobile quarterback. I don't know. I think he may need to hit the portal. It just doesn't seem like he's ideally fit for this system.
How good's that Florida job? I mean, 10 years ago, it was an elite job. 5 years ago, probably still a pretty elite job. They fired Dan Mullen after half of a bad season, basically. He wasn't recruiting the way they wanted him to recruit. He wasn't talking the way they wanted him to talk. They go hire Billy Napier. It hasn't worked at all. They owe him $26 million. It's my understanding they've got the money to pay him. The boosters have put the money together. How attractive is the Florida job? The actual job, not the reputation of the job. But the job.
Right. Neil, it just sounds like you're trying to get ahead of this Lane Kiffin to Florida talk, which I can only imagine how often you're getting asked that because I'm getting asked it. And I'll answer your question in a second. But that's so stupid to me because I'm not a very smart guy, but even I can put the pieces together here, Neil. I mean, unless Ole Miss the season completely goes sideways, which we've given no indication that'll happen.
Right.
But Ole Miss is going to go to the playoff. And, what are the dates? The playoff is mid
first game
December, right?
Yeah, unless they get one of the 4 spots, right? Let's say for kick and giggles that they don't, that they just make the playoff as let's call them the 6th seed.
Mm-hmm.
They'd either play, it's either December 20th or December 21st. They'd play their first game, and if they won, they'd play on New Year's Day.
Right, and this is all after the signing period.
Yes.
So Florida's going to sit here and say, "Okay, that's our guy, but we're going to wait to hire him." I mean, it just doesn't work that way. Mm-mm. Again, unless Ole Miss goes 8-4 and 7-5, and they're just completely eliminated. And I mean, I think Florida fans would get on board even with a disappointing season because the reputation of Lane Kiffin. But that's just so stupid. That will never in a million years happen. A and B, Florida never hires a big name coach. They always. They have. I mean, I'm getting asked, can they get Dan Lanning? I mean, they're not getting any of these guys. They're going to get like a Jed Fish, and that may even be too big of a name for them. They always hire a relatively unknown or at least a successful G5. So to answer your question, how attractive is the Florida job? I mean, I think it's attractive, but their fans are pretty fickle. I mean, they're all in till they're not, and they'll turn on you on a dime. And when your biggest rival is the biggest juggernaut in the sport, and all of a sudden Florida State, even though they're struggling, and Miami looks like they're turning it around, I don't know. I don't think it is in this era. I mean, hell, Missouri's in the top 10 right now. Ole Miss is in the top 10 right now. Whatever the traditional rules are of what makes a great program, I don't think it necessarily applies anymore. And I don't know how good of a job. Now, if they hire an elite coach, I think you can win a national championship there. But they are pretty far removed from even an SEC championship. I think it's been over 20 some odd years. So it's a very good job, but it's not an elite job.
Yeah, I agree. You know, people do the deal where it's our field. There's a lot of the traditionalists in our field. I'm not making fun of anybody. I mean, I guess I kind of am, but I'm not trying to. But the old school guys that grew up building their career during a different era, they talk about like Eli Drinkwitz, Lane Kiffin for Florida, like they'd fight for it. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they would. I don't know. I can't claim to know either man personally. But like Eli Drinkwitz has it going at Missouri. They're paying him a lot of money. The NIL program is terrific. The state is all behind it. It's the only job in town. I mean, he competes against the Kansas City Chiefs a little bit, but not really, right? I mean, he doesn't have to worry about losing players or games to the Chiefs. Maybe a few fans here and there, but nothing else. Then you have Lane Kiffin, who's been at Ole Miss for 5 years. They give him anything he wants. They literally made his Labrador Retriever the mascot. They've given him basically an unlimited budget. He's got Joe Judge on his staff. He's got his brother Chris on the staff. He's got Zach Arnett on the staff as just support staff guys, right? He gets whatever he wants. And he's won. And he's got a really good NIL program. And this is going to sound like a slap at Mississippi State, but for right now, it's true. Right now, Mississippi State's not in the same ballpark as Ole Miss. They're not even in the same – they're technically in the same league, but they're not in the same league. Maybe they will be in a few years, but they're not today. And so right now, you're kind of the only show in town in your state, albeit a small state. None of that can be said at Florida. None of it. And so I don't know that for either one of those men – that move today makes a lot of sense. Yeah, 10 years ago, sure. They'd both jump. You jump from Ole Miss to Florida. You jump from Missouri to Florida. But we're not living in 10 years ago. We're living in now. And I don't know that for either guy it makes a ton of sense. Beyond the timing of the playoff and the early signing period and all of those really valid points that you made, I think it even goes beyond that to I'm not sure it's as good of a job.
The only way I could see it, and this isn't just about Lane Kiffin, but it certainly fits, and it can fit any coach of the profile. But if, like, let's say Ole Miss goes 8-4, I don't think their NIL is going to be as strong next year. I think that's fair to say. So if you have a disappointment, he gets on the phone with Jimmy Sexton, and Sexton can confirm, okay, well, Florida hates Napier. They hate losing. They're willing to commit $20 million to NIL today. You know, I think it would suit a coach there. And we could say the same thing about Drink or any coach. You know what I mean? Like, if these coaches that are getting what they want and they're not delivering, I think it would be wise to pack the bags and try it somewhere else at a desperate fan base, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and if you told me that, yeah, because I agree with you. Like we're talking about Florida State, right? If Florida State doesn't win, you go back to the same fans and go, okay, well, that didn't work. Let's do it again. And it's not long before people are like, man, this is stupid. I mean, we're just throwing money into something that doesn't work. I can take that money and do a lot of other things with it. And in a world where the economy goes south or a presidential election doesn't go the way that people expect it to go or want it to go or whatever, I mean, the world happens. Everything's not in a vacuum. If you're not winning, it's really hard to keep going back to people and going, hey, keep giving us money. See? Because at Ole Miss, what they've been able to do is say, hey, look, if you put the money in, we'll get you these players. The program will get better. And to this point, it's been truth in advertising. They've raised the money. They've gone out and got Walter and Olin and Pupal and Princely Amon-Mielen, and the list goes on. And sure enough, they look like this dominant program. They're top 5 in the country, heading to Wake Forest on Saturday. But in a world where, you're right, let's say in a world where they go 8-4, people would look at it and go, I don't know, man. I really dug deep last year. It didn't really work. I didn't really get my money's worth. I can't do that as much this time. I'll give you something, but I can't give as much. And then there will be people that go, no, it didn't work. I'm not doing that again. My wife's still pissed off at me about that check, right? And so that's going to happen. I'm not picking on Florida State and Ole Miss, but just across the board, that is going to be a real thing.
Right, and it's just so fascinating because we've never experienced this, but, the smart programs are taking advantage of this in unique ways, like when Tennessee beat Alabama for the first time in 15, whatever, I think maybe even longer, 16, 17 years. They got more NIL that day than any day ever. And they hammered it, and they've turned that into the roster they have now. So there's people that are being very, very wise about this whole situation. Oklahoma didn't realize what they were necessarily in for. They lost their best offensive lineman. He now plays at Missouri. And that happened at a drop of a dime there. They had an agreement with him. He took it to Missouri, and I don't know how much they gave him, but apparently they gave him more. So, sometimes it takes a lesson like that, but this is a new world, Neil, and that's kind of why I'm so excited about it. That's because I think it's great that Ole Miss has got a shot, that Missouri's got a shot. I don't want it to be Georgia and Alabama and Ohio State every year. I mean, Luther Burden was going to go play at Ohio State, and if he wasn't going to go there, he was going to go to Georgia. Well, now he's at Missouri. So I think these are good. The Nebraska quarterback, he was going to go to Georgia. He'd just be another one. Now I'm sure he's making, I have no idea, but I'm sure he's making very good money. And he's given Nebraska, as strange as that sounds, because they used to be dominant, but he's given those fans hope. And I think that's good for the sport.
Yeah, I do too. Yeah, I do too, for sure. It's one of the reasons the NFL is so good, right? I mean, it's the NFL's king for 3 reasons. 1, fantasy football. 2, gambling. And 3, parity. Your team is never more than a draft or 2 away from being competitive. And so we haven't had that in the college game for a while. The college game's been the same 4 programs basically for 15, 20 years, and that is boring. And now this is interesting with the 12-team playoff, and if you make the playoff, you can get on a roll or whatever. Let's talk about some other teams from the league that look like playoff teams, or that people talk about as playoff teams. God, Texas went to Michigan and just destroyed them. They look great. I mean, so far, in terms of just teams that have just passed the eye test, if you will, I mean, yeah, Georgia's on a different planet, but Texas is pretty close to their planet right now. They look like the one team, and they've had the opportunity. They played it was Colorado State in week 1, and then just bombed the defending champs in Ann Arbor. I mean, looked so dominant. Do it. What have you thought of the Horns?
I think the thing that stands out to me is their defense. Their defense has been very, very dominant in their 2 performances. Michigan got a score late to make it kind of look like they showed life. They really didn't, like you said there. And if I don't have a Heisman vote, but if I did, it'd go to Quinn Ewers right now. Just after watching him the first 2 weeks, just how in command he is of that Sarkisian offense. I really thought with all the pieces they lost at receiver, tight end, and running back to the draft, I thought they would take a step back, and I thought it would, or at least take some time. And it seemingly has taken no time. They can hit you in so many different ways, and that's a credit to Sarkisian. He may be the best, him and Kiffin and maybe Heupel, 3 of the best play callers in college football. But everything you said, I was not necessarily buying the hype, and I'm trying not to get too ahead of it because we've not even played a conference game yet. But yeah, they look like the second best team in the conference right now.
Tennessee goes to Oklahoma next week, and I remember, I think you and I were talking about this. This is like one of the games we had circled as, this is going to be great. And now I'm like, I don't know how Oklahoma's going to stay on the field with those guys. I mean, Tennessee looks like just like Heupel's a great, like you said. I agree with you completely. By the way, those three guys are great play callers, and you can see it in game to game. And Heupel's terrific, and especially when you give Heupel a good quarterback, and he's really good. You give Heupel a great quarterback, and I don't know. We'll see when this guy starts getting hit some. Right? Maybe it changes. Maybe. I mean, he looks like Randall Cunningham out there right now, and maybe he gets hit a few times and starts seeing things differently. I don't know, but Nico looks like the deal, and if he's that good, and their offense is that explosive, I know that their secondary and stuff has some weaknesses, but look, if you're scoring in the 40s, you're probably going to be okay. And they look like an absolute juggernaut offensively.
Yeah, but while the quarterback Nico steals all the headlines, the real headline is the defense, and particularly the defensive front, where they legitimately go probably 12 deep of quality linemen that are just rotating in and out. And again, it's been 2 weeks, but I mean, they humbled NC State is a kind word for what they did to them. So
yeah, that's a good
Tennessee
program, man. I mean, that's a solid program, and they don't get beat like that very much. That was they got beat down in a way that Dave Doeren teams typically don't get beat down.
Right, and it's probably not fair to stretch back to last season, but 3 straight games, Tennessee's not even allowed a touchdown. So, I mean, their defense, and last year their offense was not good. They still won 9 games. That should give you an indication of how far the defense has come under Josh Heupel. But they're dominant on the ground. If you play defense and you're dominant they were top 2 or 3 in the SEC last year in rushing. They look even better this year. So, yeah, they're incredibly strong on the offensive and defensive line. And yeah, I mean, everything you said about Nico, I agree with. And he's still learning. He made 2 mistakes, one big one last week, and one pick six. I wouldn't put that on him. He got hit when he was throwing it, but the other one was on him. So when you win 51-10 and your quarterback's throwing multiple interceptions, and not only that, but right after he threw I think it was the pick six, it was either the pick six or the other one, I can't really recall, but immediately after they dialed up like a 60-yard pass play. I mean, he's just seemed completely unfazed for a redshirt freshman quarterback. That's what you want to see. So, yeah, I mean, Tennessee's right there as well. We'll see. They got to play Georgia and Alabama and Oklahoma. Every bad thing we said about them, they have a hell of a defense too. So
yeah,
when Heupel his system, it can get bogged down with really good defensive lines. As it's always funny when people kind of pick it apart. Well, you can't beat Georgia. Well, hell, no one can. Aside from Nick Saban. But yeah, but so those will be the games that'll define the season. But after 2 weeks, I would say Tennessee's in that playoff as well.
Yeah, I would too. So here's my question: 2024 stock, not long-term stock. 2024 stock. You buying Tennessee or Alabama right now?
Probably still Alabama.
Really? Okay. Why?
But I'm a Tennessee grad, so I have to try to be objective here. But again, what Kalen DeBoer has done at the stops has been remarkable. And again, just 2 weeks of data, but the first week they looked unstoppable. And then last week they could have lost to South Florida. So I don't know what to make of them, but their defense was very good. They turned it over 3 or 4 times last week. That was kind of why they were hanging around with South Florida. But I'm a little concerned with their offensive line. They're missing a couple pieces there at Alabama. So, just the track record there. They've got so much money that they're gonna throw in everything they have to remain competitive. But I do wonder how much, if at all, this is going to get to Kalen DeBoer. Just Nick Saban hanging around, and they're dedicating the field to him, this, that, and the other. I mean, it can't be easy. It's one thing to replace the greatest of all time. It's another when the guy's overlooking every decision you make out there. And
I don't know if you saw.
Good luck, buddy.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw.
Good luck. Good luck if Georgia beats them. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, I'm with you completely. Like he does a show. Alabama's done this show forever. When I was doing radio in Mobile, I used to make fun of this show on Thursday nights. It's called Hey Coach. And, they interview a media person and they interview the coach and they talk about the opponent. And then they go to the callers. Hey, this is, and the guy will call in and say, hey, Coach, this is Jim from Demopolis. I just want to say I love you and you need to throw to the tight end more. And we're cheering for you here in Demopolis and all that. Anyway, my friend Chris Stewart, who's the radio voice of the Crimson Tide now, been there forever. Been the basketball voice forever. The baseball voice, has been the sideline reporter for a long time. Filled in that 1 year for Eli Gold, and now it's his turn. He's the voice of the Tide. Chris is awesome, a pro's pro. And he said, when we come back, we'll take calls for Coach Saban. And he caught himself, and someone in his ear was like, oh, my God, you did it. And he made a joke of it. He's like, oh, well, if you had in the office pool, if you had this date. And Kalen DeBoer was a good sport about it, but there was something in his eyes, man, that was like, God, it's constant. It's constant. Now, you had to know he was getting into that, right? But I think it's one thing to say, oh, yeah, okay, he's going to be around and it's going to be there. But, man, Kalen DeBoer, think about this. Every day Nick Saban's around. He's in the building. He's in the stadium. You wake up on Saturday morning and there he is right in front of you on the television screen. And then you go to your game and there he is. You hear the crowd roar when he walks in. And now they've named the field for him. It's Nick Saban Field and Saban here and Saban there. And that's a lot, man. I mean, that's a lot to deal with. And then the expectation, oh, and by the way, Kalen, win the national championship or else. And I think win multiple national champ. I don't think one's going to be enough. Oh no, but I mean, to get multiple, you got to get the first one, and I mean, it just feels like a lot. Like even from just the outside looking in, there was something about the moment I was just watching. I was like, that dude. There's a part of him that's going, whew. And maybe I'm wrong, but that's kind of what it looked like. And keep in mind, he's undefeated, so. Any issues he's having, he didn't blow out South Florida. And I mean, and in the first game, they scored 50-something points, and the fans were like, yeah, I didn't like the way that looked and that looked. And he made the comment about all the changes he's made. And right. I mean, they're going to put for sale signs in his yard, all that, if Saban only lost once to Georgia. You've already done it in your first shot. Saban only lost to Tennessee once in 17, 18 years. You've already done it. You know what I mean? Like, that's what's going to kill him. It's not anything else. I really don't think. Yeah, I mean, he could lose to Georgia and people go, God, you lost to Georgia in your first month. I mean, it's totally unfair. It's absurd, but but I mean, it could easily happen. All right, another game that I've got circled for a couple of weeks from now for a lot of reasons. I don't know if you heard this, but Hugh Freeze only made one bad play call. Everything else was on his player. They get New Mexico this week. Arkansas gets UAB this week. I'm gonna give them both wins for kicks and giggles. Okay. Arkansas goes to Auburn next week. It's a big, big game for Hugh Freeze. And it's probably a game that Sam Pittman and company have circled because they got humiliated in Fayetteville last year. And I'm on the same boat on this, right? If we're having a really different conversation about Arkansas today if they just change one play here, one play there against Oklahoma State. We're talking about, they might be the most improved team in the league. If they win at Auburn, they can build off that. Because I've been saying all week, if I'm Sam Pittman, I'm telling my guys, hey, look, we gave that one away. On the flip side, look how much better we played, and look what we could be if we stop shooting ourselves. Look what we could be. I don't know that Hugh Freeze can really say that. He's thrown his quarterback under the bus. He's probably got that can't go over tremendously well in the locker room. I've got that one circled next week in Jordan-Hare as a potential season flipper for both teams, where if you're Arkansas and you beat Auburn, you got a little momentum. And if you're Auburn and you lose to Arkansas, Michael, this thing could go off the rails because nobody in Dallas was going, well, Auburn to start the season, they could lose to Cal and Arkansas. No, we gave them W's. Those were, part of the Auburn scenario was they get off to this hot start because the schedule's light. Well, they lost to Cal, and I think they could lose to Arkansas. And if they do, all of a sudden it's Oklahoma, Georgia. That thing starts to pile up, and it gets ugly on the Plains fast.
And Missouri after Georgia. So,
yeah.
So glad we brought up Hugh Freeze because I even if you didn't, I was going to say, how thankful are you that you're no longer covering this experiment? Because again, this is the Hugh Freeze experiment. Yes, he lost to Cal. It just tells me they're probably going to beat Georgia or Alabama in some. That's completely nonsensical, but that's kind of the way it goes for that guy. So
yeah, it does a little bit.
Yeah, and to your point, I thought for sure Sam Pittman was going to get fired after that. Yeah, I mean, the team quit on him. I think it was like 48-3, 52-3, something like that last season.
It was bad.
And prior to that, he lost to Hugh Freeze at Liberty. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why that's a big reason why Hugh is a coach right now at Auburn, because everybody said, my God, he's still got it, So that's about the last big win Hugh has had, though. So, yeah, and you just start seeing his record. I don't have it on the top of my head, but it's ridiculous. It's like
he's 7-8 at Auburn in his 15 games.
Right, but there's another one. It's like he's like 4-11 in his last 15 against FBS teams. I mean, it's remarkable how pedestrian, and that's not even pedestrian. That's poor. How poor that record is for Hugh against garbage teams here. So. Yeah, I mean, I'm already starting to see the fans a little bit turn on him, and couldn't happen to a nicer guy. I feel bad for the people at Auburn because while you were covering him, they were saying all these things, and then the minute he got hired there, they had to do an about face, and they worship the guy and freeze warning this, and recruiting's doing well. Well, I don't know. I'm very biased against him, so I try to be as objective as possible watching Auburn, but. Just one stupid decision after another. I mean, how can you come out here and say, well, I ain't spending $1 million for a quarterback? And then I would say, well, you don't have to go to the dollar store either. That's kind of what he decided to do. And he's trying to do a model. And I got a lot of respect for people like Josh Pape. They completely destroyed me when I said in the offseason that Hugh Freeze is going to be on the hot seat because in this NIL, in this portal world, it's great. I think they have a top 5 recruiting class right now. That will not stick if they go 6-6, 7-5, and hell, the freshmen that he's got now, they're going to get in the portal. I can guarantee you that.
Oh yeah, of course. Well, I mean that's the thing, right? You can go win these recruiting wars. That's great if you have a really established program like Georgia. Like they have a proven model. They have this proven model that works, right? Kirby's now like Saban was, where Nick Saban was able for years to go, hey, look, I mean, I'm paraphrasing this dramatically, but hey, come here, buy into the system, look at these people that I've put into the league first, second round. We think you're one of those guys. Yeah, we'll give you a Dodge Charger. We'll take care of you. It's all good. But come here. You don't take as much. You got it. Georgia can do that now. They go recruit guys. Look at what we're putting in the NFL. Look what we're putting in the NFL. There's this proven thing. Freeze doesn't have that at Auburn. And he put some guys in the NFL at Ole Miss, but it wasn't like that. He didn't win championships. Nick Saban's won titles. Kirby Smart's won titles. Hugh's not won any titles. And so those kids are going to, maybe they actually show up, but they can leave in a heartbeat. I think you have to do it sort of the way Kiffin's done it, the way Drinkwitz has done it, where you get your floor up, and then you can start recruiting. Like both of those guys are recruiting better at the high school level today at Ole Miss and Missouri, respectively, than they were when they first got there, and it was hard to get guys. It was easier to get guys out of the portal, build the bottom up of your program, stop collapsing, and then go from there. Hugh is stubborn. He's not going to do it that way. He's got a lot of that Dabo Sweeney stuff in him where we do it a certain way, and it's better when I can sit down and talk to grandma and them, and okay, but that model might not work anymore. And I think it shows a refusal to grow. Is what I see. Like, I think Kiffin's grown a lot. People talk about Drinkwitz having grown a lot. Like, people do the Drinkwitz is a nerd or whatever. I'm like, seems like a pretty smart guy to me. Like, they figured it out. Heupel's done this at Tennessee. They went out, hey, we've got to address certain areas. Let's go do it. They did it. And then you can recruit into that. And I don't know. I look at the deal at Auburn and go, this thing could get really, really south fast. Because, I mean, play along with me for a minute. They've got Arkansas, for kicks and giggles, let's make that a loss, okay? Oklahoma, certainly losable. Georgia's a loss. At Missouri, man, by the time they go to Kentucky late October, they're turned on him. And then you'll laugh at me, but I think Vanderbilt's a losable game for Auburn. And so all of a sudden, you let some of those pile up, and they finish. You know how they finish at Alabama. That's never fun. I mean, I don't think it's this year necessarily, but man, I think the seat could get super hot. And in this era of college football, where if fans don't believe in you and they won't give to your NIL, and they start going, I'm not coming, not supporting this. This is not what I'm doing. I think the trigger is much faster than it used to be.
Yeah, no doubt. And especially when he's made public, I'm not a fan of the portal necessarily, or, he's more high school and we ain't paying for that. I mean, any coach that says that's a complete idiot. Like, I don't understand how I have better PR than some of these people. Brian Kelly, I'll throw him in the same boat. We're not paying players to get here. And I know, what he's really trying to say, but you just can't say it. Not when you're making $10 million a year.
It's one of the things I really respect about what Kiffin said, where Kiffin goes, we don't do the family thing in recruiting. We don't talk about that. He goes, because it's not genuine. And I'm like, you're exactly right. It's not. Right. If your child is underachieving, if your child is being an absolute pain in the ass and failing algebra and got kicked off couldn't make the basketball team because he can't jump, you don't disown your son. You don't go, hey, listen, bud, Jimmy, I'm going to process you out. We're going to go get a different kid to live in your bedroom. No, I mean, you still love Jimmy. In college football, you tell Jimmy, hey, listen, man, we're going to help you land at Mercer in Middle Tennessee. I know some people there. We're going to get you there, but you got to go because we got to use your spot because we're taking this kid from South Alabama that's tearing it up. He's about to take your spot on the roster. So, hey, it's been nice. Tell your mom and them, cool, but peace out. Good luck. It's not family, and Hugh's doing the family thing. Number one, it's bullshit, bogus. But number two, it doesn't work in this era of college football. And when you insist on talking about it, you just kind of make yourself look like an idiot.
Right. So, I mean, and everything you said, I agree with. And case in point, Dabo. I mean, Dabo was at the top of the sport, and he is not adjusted. So you adapt or you die. And again, but 5-10 years ago, Hugh Freeze's plan would have worked beautifully, I think, at Auburn. But it's a different time.
Yeah, it's what made Saban great was adaptability. More than anything else, he adapted. There was a certain way that he wanted to win. When that way wasn't as possible anymore, he went to another way because ultimately he just wanted to win, and he did. And that's Kirby Smart's done the same thing at Georgia. They've always been able to adapt. Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss adapted. I mean, when Kiffin got to Ole Miss, there was no transfer portal. There was no NIL. I don't know what he thought he would do here, but once those things became available, he jumped into it. And so there's examples all over the place. And having covered Hugh Freeze for several years, I don't think that's in him. So I've got them on absolute watch. I think they're potentially a big story. All right, we hadn't touched this. We never talk about them. We'll do it quickly. I know you got to go. Vanderbilt. It's a huge win against Virginia Tech. Just a huge win. It felt like this. And again, I'm not making more of this than it was. But before the year, people were talking about 2-10. And I thought Clark Lee, the opposite of Hugh Freeze in many ways. Last year, it would have been so easy, Michael, for Clark Lee to go, ain't nobody winning here. I love it. It's a great place. It's Nashville. Nashville's awesome. It's a great school. Got a great academic reputation. They're not invested. Stadium sucks. Everything sucks. Not going to win. I'll go be a defensive coordinator. I'll make a bunch of money. I'll try again somewhere else down the road. Instead, he looked in the mirror and went, okay, what are the things we can fix? And he kind of changed everything. And I thought that was such a big win for them. And their kids, I don't know if you watched any of it. I watched a little of their game against Alcorn. And Alcorn sucks. I get it. But they did to Alcorn what Vanderbilt teams don't typically do to teams. They just blew them out. They destroyed them. And they played with a lot of confidence. They played with a lot of joy, happiness. I mean, you could see it. I think this spot for them Saturday at Georgia State is huge because that's kind of a weird game. But if they go over there and get that, all of a sudden, I think they'll beat Ball State, right? And later in the year, if they could get 2 wins in the league, 6-6, they'd be the happiest 6-6 bowl team in the country. And he might actually be able to create a modicum of momentum there.
Neil, do you know what their over-under win total was prior to the season?
2.5.
Yeah, 2.5. So they could accomplish that this week in the third game of the season. So, man, it's been remarkable. Diego Pavia has just been a joy to watch. And shout out, I think we all know the real mastermind there, Jerry Kill, calling it the kill zone there. But, yeah, I mean, in this era where some of these coaches, don't want to deal with everything, maybe this is the path. Come be a special advisor, whatever they want to call it, and bring your quarterback, bring your offensive coordinator, come to the SEC. I love it. And it was completely overlooked when it happened, probably because it is Vanderbilt, but Clark Lee took command of the defense. He's calling the defense now for the first time as a head coach. That seems to have worked real wonders for him. And like you said, they scored on offense, they scored on defense, they scored on special teams last week against Alcorn. That's what you want to see. This isn't some kind of fluke where they just have some amazing Michael Vick and a bunch of scrubs with them. This is a team effort, even though Diego Pavia seems to have really injected life and enthusiasm into this program. But yeah, it's great. I just wish they had embraced NIL a little bit earlier, because they lost damn near every contributor from last year's team. But again, it's Vanderbilt. Who's going to give to them? But yeah, I mean, I think it's a real credit. And if they get to 6-6, I think we got to make Clark Lee Coach of the Year
all day. Absolutely. I think everybody in the league, even the coaches, will be like, you have to vote for him. All right, last thing. As of today, as we get ready for week 3, how many SEC teams make the playoffs and which ones are they?
Oh, man. Probably 4. I don't know how realistic it is to get any more than that, but hell, I'll be rooting for it. It's my business here. But I think that win over Michigan was huge for perception because the SEC lost some big games week 1. I think it kind of dinged it a little bit.
I do too.
Outside of Georgia just destroying Clemson, and credit Vanderbilt as well for beating Virginia Tech. I think that was, in hindsight, that's going to help. So, yeah, who are the teams? Georgia, obviously, Texas so far. The winner of Tennessee, Alabama. I'll give that to Tennessee just because it's in Neyland, but would not be surprised at all if Alabama wins that game. And then give me Ole Miss. Okay. Those would be the 4.
Michael, great stuff as always. It's That SEC Podcast. Check him out wherever you listen to podcasts. Check him out on YouTube as well. Really appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you, Michael, very much. Connor O'Neill covers both Wake Forest and Duke for Rivals.com. So we might dive into a couple of different things here. We'll get you ready for Ole Miss at Wake Forest. We'll get the Wake Forest perspective on Saturday evening's contest. But first, Connor, thanks for being on the show. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Neil.
All right, I want to start here because this is interesting to me. I've always kind of been a conference realignment nerd. I was told years ago to watch for Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC. So when it happened, a lot of people were like, "Oh my God, can you believe it?" And I was like, "Yeah, I really can believe it." And I've been hearing for a while, for years, from a lot of the same people, "Hey, the SEC really covets North Carolina. The SEC really likes Virginia. They're very interested in adding those schools, but the ACC grant of rights is more complicated. And obviously Texas and Oklahoma were able to extricate themselves earlier because the deal was coming up and et cetera. So give me you're there in North Carolina in the Research Triangle area, and what's sort of the feel there for the future of the ACC? And then along those lines, I'm just guessing, me being a human being, that there probably was some giggles early in the season when Florida State dropped a couple, especially the one to BC.
There was giggling. You had the pushback of like, hey, this is good that Georgia Tech is beating Florida State in Ireland. It's putting the conference in a spotlight. I was not one of those people. I think your best teams have to be your best teams. And Florida State and Clemson, like the litigation duo, has to be the ACC's best teams. But I don't work for the ACC, so I got some jokes off when they were combined 0-3. I know that the 0-1 that Clemson was playing Georgia is a little different than losing to Georgia Tech and Boston College. Like we can acknowledge that. We can be realistic here.
Yeah, everybody can lose to Georgia, and there's no jokes. But when you're Florida State and you're talking the big game, and you're a top 10, top 5 team, and you do hey, we got screwed out, and they did get screwed out of a playoff spot last year. They did. But when you're still talking about that, and you're 0-2 out of the gate to Georgia Tech and Boston College, it's humbling.
Oh, the jokes write themselves with like, wait, is Florida State good enough to be in the ACC? Like, if they can't even beat these teams, then why do we want them in our league? But no, on the serious matter, look, man, this is an important year for the ACC, I think, to get multiple teams into the playoff and then win games in the playoff to fight against the perception that it's a league that can hold its own football-wise, because I don't agree with it, but that's just the reality of where we are, where in realignment, you are what football is. And through 1 week, it was already the hopes and dreams of the entire league were pinned to Miami with the coach that doesn't know the math of when you need to take a knee to win a game and lost one last year. That's a precarious spot to be in. So I know there's a lot of football left. The grant of rights is not going to erode if the number 4 seed in the playoffs is a 10-3 Miami team or a Louisville team or whatever. This was a year to kind of break the tide, like get some things reversed in the way the ACC is talked about. And it's not that so far. It's going to get worse, I think. And that's not where this conference needs to be.
Yeah, it's in some SEC circles. I get why fans are the way fans are. The emotion, the games roll around, and you want your team to win and every other team in your league to lose because that's just the nature of fandom. But it was like, no, you probably wanted Auburn to beat Cal. As crazy as it is to say Cal's an ACC team, it just makes no sense at all. But you needed a win over an ACC team. When Arkansas had the lead over Oklahoma State, you're like, no, you probably wouldn't mind one of your lower level SEC teams beating an upper level Big 12 team. It's going to end up helping you long term, and yet Oklahoma State wins and everyone celebrates, and Auburn loses and everyone celebrates, and it's just fandom that they can't get past that. But it is interesting to watch just the new landscape play out in real time.
And that's why, it was so much fun that opening weekend to make the jokes, but the one that kind of flew under the radar was Virginia Tech is talked about as a dark horse ACC champion and has a returning quarterback who's a power runner. They returned something like 88 or 90% of their rushing and receiving yards. They picked up a few key pieces on defense through the portal. And they go out and lose to the SEC's designated doormat in Vanderbilt. It's just, they're down 17-0. It's not like it was a fluky game. Like, they got beat by a quarterback who was at New Mexico State that Did anybody really want Diego Pavia in the transfer portal? So that's a terrible look for this league.
All right, let's talk about Wake Forest a little bit. Kind of an interesting start to the season, really. I watched their opener against, was it NCA&T? And
Yep.
Wake did not look particularly good, came back and won the game. And then last weekend, they had Virginia down 2 scores, fourth quarter. And you're like, okay, well, this is interesting. Wake's about to go 2-0 and going to have a little momentum here. And I think Clawson's a whale of a coach. I'll ask you about him in a minute. But I'm like, yeah, maybe they're going to have a little steam for them, when Ole Miss gets to town. And then the final, 7 minutes of that game was an unmitigated disaster, really, for Wake. And they lose a 1-point loss to Virginia. So what do you make of the Demon Deacons so far?
Look, you never want to punt on a season 2 games in and after a first loss, but the way their schedule sets up, it now looks like they'll be 2-4 in the middle of October, because I don't know how likely it is that they win this week. I don't know how likely it is they go to NC State and win a few weeks from now. And then they've got Clemson coming in at home. And Clemson might not be good enough to compete with Georgia in game 1, but Clemson can win the ACC. They can beat the rest of the teams on their schedule. So that's a game that Wake really needed to have. I cannot for the life of me remember covering a Wake game thinking they're getting the ball back. They're up 2 touchdowns in the second half. If they score here, even if it's just a field goal, this game's going to basically be on ice. Like, all they need to do is get one sustained drive, and this thing is going to be close to we're done here. And instead, they punt away. They give up a touchdown. They have another possession where they cross midfield and then have a terrible 4th down sack that puts Virginia almost at midfield. And they just methodically and matriculate the ball downfield and score. And then even then, it's 2 minutes left and you've got 3 timeouts. You've got a veteran quarterback with an offense that's moved the ball. You still feel good. Like, you don't feel good about what just happened in the last 10 minutes, but you still feel good about your chances to win the game. And I just think Dave Clawson and the rest of this team, I'm sure they'll say differently, but it felt like they were just dumbstruck watching a 6-year senior receiver fumble the ball, and then the other 6th-year senior receiver try to pick up the ball and run with it instead of just falling on it, instead of realizing that the possession is the most important part, instead of trying to advance the ball downfield and make this hero play. And like that is where, like, everything about Clawson's tenure at Wake Forest, when they've been successful, it's been because they win in the margins. Like, they're not out-talenting many teams, but they're winning because they're better in turnover margin, they're better on 3rd downs, they're better in the kicking game and return game. And when you have that type of turnover in that situation, it makes you question a lot of things about this program as much as you can 2 games into a season.
So this is Clawson's 11th season at Wake?
Yep.
He's a guy that has had success there. His name's popped up in coaching search lists and stuff repeatedly. Why do you think he's still at Wake? Is it because he's decided that he wants to make Wake his long-term stop, or is there something about him that ultimately prevents him from landing another job?
I think Dave got to Wake and wasn't 100% sold on being at Wake for the rest of his career. But I think as he grew Wake's football program, the infrastructure around Wake Forest grew with it. They added an indoor facility. They've done some things. I'm sure he would tell you he'd like more things to be done on the admission side to get transfers in. Wake really limits the amounts of credits you can get as a transfer to come into the school. They've just, the support has grown. Like, his salary is a part of it, but also salary pool for his assistants has grown, and that's why I think 5 out of his 10 assistants are the same ones that he came here with. And that's just, it's amazing continuity, and that's why their offense has basically been their offense for a decade now. I think the flirtation that was most interesting was Virginia Tech in 2019. No, not 2019, 2021. That was in the middle of Wake's 11-win season when they're getting ready to try to play for an ACC championship game. That one was the one. Like, if he was going to take a job, it was going to be in the region. He's coached in Virginia before when he was at Richmond. He knows the lay of the land. He stays in the ACC. He still is relatively close to the beach and relatively close to Charlotte, which are two very important locations for Dave. So him not taking that job, to me, told me like he's at Wake until the thing goes stale, or he wants to retire and say he's had a nice career and made a good living for himself and his family.
Yeah, and sometimes a place doesn't feel like home until it becomes home, and then suddenly it's home. You know, I mean, it's we might be watching that with Lane Kiffin right now at Ole Miss, where I don't think Lane ever thought he'd be here 5 years, and here he is in year 5, and I mean, he might leave in November, but he might. I think the scenario where he stays for a long period of time is in play, really, for the first time, and you know, it's interesting to watch that develop with people. You mentioned the offense. It is an offense that works for them, except when they play big physical defensive lines, right? I mean, when they'll score against the Virginias of the world and score a lot of points and really look explosive, and then they'll play a really good Clemson team or a really good Miami team or whoever, and it kind of gets blown up, that slow mesh offense. They're going to keep running it. And Ole Miss this year has what appears to be a very explosive, big, physical defensive line. How much of a concern is that for Wake Forest on Saturday?
It's very much of one. I mean, that I've written for years. I've said it for years. It wasn't until the 2022 game against Clemson where they lost in double overtime in Winston-Salem. DJU and Sam Hartman combined for, I think, 11 touchdown throws. It wasn't until that game that I actually thought Wake Forest could move the ball and score on Clemson, because they always had one or two tailor-made NFL defensive tackles that would just wreck the thing from the middle, and it wouldn't have the time to develop into a mesh because, you know, there's Christian Wilkins or Dexter Lawrence or one of those guys blowing up your guard and your center. I don't know how well it works against Ole Miss. Neither quarterback that Wake Forest has is Sam Hartman, and that's just kind of the brutal truth of it. So it's something that Wake will tell you, and there is some truth to it. They only run that slow mesh. Sometimes they'll run it 1 out of 8 plays in a game. Sometimes they'll run it, 3 out of 5. They vary up the quickness of it. They vary up the frequency. I mean, sometimes it's just straight drop back. Sometimes it's just straight handoff. I have a feeling, given Ole Miss and what they'll bring in their pedigree, it'll be a lot less of it. It'll be a lot less slow mesh, and they'll see a lot of more kind of traditional stuff in the RPO and spread game.
On the other side of the ball, Jackson Dart's off to a tremendous start for Ole Miss, putting up just kind of arcade numbers, really video game numbers. He's got some really good receivers. Juice Wells, the former South Carolina standout, Trey Harris, Caden Priestcorn. They have a lot of different weapons. I noticed after the Virginia game, I was reading your story, and Clausen was quoted as saying there was some concerns with they had some struggles, I think, I'm paraphrasing, with Virginia's tempo. Obviously, Ole Miss is known for its tempo. It's one of the Lane Kiffin kind of staples, is that when they want to go fast, they go really fast, and it's pretty effective. How big of a concern is that for Wake going into Saturday?
Oh, I mean, I get the sense that if Wake doesn't solve the issues they had against Virginia, then Lane can name the score, and they'll get to it. It's just Wake has two safeties that are experienced in Evan Slocum and Nick Anderson. They're not the fastest guys. I don't think it's too disrespectful to say that about them. They have faster safeties, but they're younger. So the potential for MAs is a little higher when they bring in the second team safeties. And they have corners that, they were already going to be struggling to replace Kalen Carson, who was a 5th-round pick of the Cowboys and played well, I think, as a rookie yesterday. And in the spring portal, they lost Deshaun Jones to Alabama, who was going to be their only returning starter in the secondary. So they're trying to replace them with a 3rd-year corner who missed a year with a torn ACL previously at Wake, a 6th-year corner who transferred from Kent State, who has some tread on his tires, but has a great name, Capone Blue, and a guy from Lenore Rhine, which I always have to look up if that's a D2 or a D3 here in North Carolina. I'm not sugarcoating anything, but it's really hard to replace an NFL draft pick with a guy that comes from a lower level of football, let alone not even the FCS, a lower division.
Yeah, for sure. All right. When I think of Francine, I think of the wife in American Dad. I'm a big cartoon person. I like those shows. American Dad's not my favorite, but sometimes I will watch it, and I think of Francine. But Francine potentially impacts this game if the rain goes just right. Ole Miss was talking today on Monday, as we taped this on Monday. You're seeing it on Thursday, but Ole Miss was talking about how they got to start thinking about some wet ball drills, stuff like that. If it rains, 75% chance, by the way, in Winston-Salem on Saturday. If it rains, does that impact the game at all?
A little bit. I'm trying to remember if Wake played a rain game last year. Nothing comes to mind immediately. I always go back, for whatever reason, I remember a 2019 game that they played Florida State, and that was Willie Taggart, Florida State, and Wake won 22-20 and kicked 5 field goals to win. And I remember Willie Taggart was quoted saying they didn't do any wet ball work coming into the week. It was just like, oh my God.
Why would you
How are you the coach of Florida State?
Willie Taggart, blast from the past. I can remember a former Ole Miss AD wanting to hire Willie Taggart. He had been at Oregon for 1 year, and there was a sense at one point that they would be able to pull it off. They'd be able to hire him. And looking back, you're like, boy, you dodged a bullet right there, because he was not capable of handling the big job.
No, some of the best hires are the ones you don't make. No, I think Wake's offense functions okay in the rain. They might function a little better just because their running backs are decent. Like Damon Claiborne has a good burst to him. I don't know what his burst is going to look like against a bona fide top 5 team, but he is a really good running back. I've been calling him the second best running back I've seen at Wake Forest over the last 8 years, and the only one better was Kenneth Walker III, who ran for about 1,100 yards at Wake in 2 years and then put up about 1,500 at Michigan State in his 1 year there. So I think their running game, they can lean on it a little more if they need to. If it's rainy and muddy, and well, it doesn't get muddy because it's turf, but if it's rainy and slick like that on the turf, then I think they're fine running it.
All right. I hate when people do this to me. So I'm about to do to you what I hate when people do to me, and I don't know why I'm doing it. As I'm getting ready to do it, I'm like, Neil, why are you doing this? People will sometimes ask me, like, what's the pregame scene at Ole Miss? And it's obviously the Grove and stuff, but I'm getting ready to go work, right? So I'm not hanging out in the Grove getting trashed before a game, although there are weeks where the game lasts so long that I could, and I'd have plenty of time to get over it and time to write. But regardless, what's the pregame scene at Wake Forest? Is it more around the stadium, or are people at the bars in Winston-Salem? What's the scene look like?
It's all around the stadium. They've got plenty of space. They've got expansive parking lots. To an extent, it's a stadium that only holds 30,000. So I think I was telling you on an email that one of the Wake will get criticized for it and dinged for it for having a little league field compared to some other behemoths, but makes traffic getting into games pretty easy. I have to imagine in the few times that I've been to like Clemson and Florida State, it's like a different world to me. But they'll get tailgates out there. There will be a pretty festive scene. I imagine a lot of the scene will be Ole Miss people. Maybe that's more fear mongering over here. People thinking that Ole Miss is going to have half the stadium or whatever. So I imagine there will be the SEC flavor of tailgate will be present here. But everybody stays pretty close to the stadium. Downtown Winston is a good couple miles from Wake. Wake Stadium is kind of in between campus and downtown.
All right. So last thing, I'm curious, how long before kind of your subscribers, the people that are big Wake fans, Duke fans, is it always on the cusp of turning to basketball, or is there like a kind of a date that's out there where the shift just goes to hoops?
Duke is always basketball. I kind of think of it in terms of there being two kinds of Duke fans, and there's the kind of Duke fans that fit the stereotype of like they're Duke basketball fans, they're Yankee fans, they are pick your juggernaut of college football team that they're fans of, whether it's like Miami or Alabama or whoever. And then there's the fans of Duke, where they care about Duke football, Duke basketball, Duke baseball, they're actually fans of the university, and the university has a good basketball program. Wake is different. Wake is more seasonal. And Wake fans will kind of tune out on football if the season is going poorly. Last year, it certainly was never really got off the ground, even though, as crazy as it is, if they win their finale, they're in a bowl game at 5-7. But
fun. Nothing like a 5.
Yeah. You gotta when you have to track the APR stuff to figure out if your team is going to be bowl eligible. Man, it's like, what are we doing here? Can you just say you're not going to take the bowl invite? I know that nobody is ever going to do that other than like Notre Dame if everything falls off a cliff for them.
Now, Ole Miss announced at the SEC tournament last year they were not accepting an NIT bid, and I was very appreciative. I was like, man, I'm tired of covering this team. This team's tired of playing with each other. The coaches are tired of this team. Yeah, kudos. Let's do this. But yeah, when you're 4-7 and like, if we win this last one and enough guys on the other teams fail, we might get to go to the Boca Bowl or something. That's pretty.
Yeah, it's such a loser bowl. And this is where I tie it all into my grand plan. If I'm ever the college football czar, is to move bowl games to the start of the season, move the FCS games to spring so that those replace spring games, because nobody wants to show anything in the spring anyway. But that might be a topic for another podcast.
No, well, I mean, you're one of a lot of people that's I've not heard the one about the spring, and I actually think it's a fix, right? I mean, like Lane Kiffin is complaining, and I don't know how genuine it is. I don't know whether this is him just kind of coaching fans or how much this is him really being peeved. I don't know. Not sure I care enough to actually ask him, is this serious? But Ole Miss fans showed up for the Furman game. They showed up for the Middle Tennessee game. Ole Miss goes into the Wake Forest game with a cumulative score of 128-3. Fans they're just not going to stay all day for those games. I mean, the Furman game was 76-0. If Ole Miss and Furman played 100 times, Ole Miss would beat Furman by 50 or more 100 times. If Ole Miss had wanted to score 100 points, they would have. I just don't know how many fans you're going to get to go, yeah, I'm going to stay here. I'm going to see how the fourth team is developing. I just don't know how many fans are that diehard. And then with Middle Tennessee, it was kind of more the same. It was a nice day. People were ready to go someplace else. So, yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think the FCS games are a joke. I think now that we've acknowledged these are professional paid players versus unpaid players, you're getting the result you would expect from professional versus amateur. And so maybe you do move it to the spring where you'd play your backups more. It wouldn't be, you could still give them the money, right?
Yeah. And that's that's my main thing is like you're still financing their athletic department to a certain degree. You're still getting the work, but it's tough for me because back my freshman year was 2007, and I went to Elon, and App State was on our schedule later in the month of September, and I wake up one Saturday morning and watch them pull off like the greatest upset of college football history, and they win at Michigan. And we just have to tell we have to tell ourselves it's okay to think that's in the past. We don't have to keep doing this because it's not going to happen for another 20 years if it ever happens again in the portal and NIL eras. So let's keep the benefit of the FCS games. Let's move them up to the spring. Then that 12th game, I mean, it frees up some conferences if they want to go to a 9-game conference schedule. It frees you up to do so, or play the bowl games in the last week of August, or play them as the season openers. People are still going to go because they're excited. And if you make them that Labor Day weekend, then they've got a 3-day weekend to travel.
It actually makes a lot of sense. I've heard people play the bowl game. Okay, here's my last question, though. If you're ESPN, and let's face it, they're writing the checks right now, right? That's what's probably holding the ACC together right now is ESPN.
Yep.
If you're ESPN, you're like, look, I know what you guys say, Connor, Neil, nobody's watching the Humanitarian Bowl on the 23rd, but it gives us 4 hours of programming that day. We need programming in December when there is no college football season and most of the country's not yet willing to go, okay, it's college basketball season. They don't really do that. They don't do that until conference play starts in January. Yeah, everybody will watch North Carolina and Duke play, but not as many are going to watch Wake Forest play Belmont on a Tuesday night in December, right? I get it. So when ESPN goes, we need that programming, I don't know that there's an answer to that.
Yeah, and that's the problem. That's one of many roadblocks. And I mean, the main roadblock is college sports needs outside the box solutions to some things, and it's so unwilling to go outside the box that it's trapped in the box. It acts like anything outside the box is Pandora's box.
Yeah, it's a great point. All right, last thing I told you, I wouldn't keep you long, and I've kept you longer than I said I would. How do you sort of see Saturday night playing out?
I mean, I'd love to be a homer and tell you it's going to be a close game and down to the wire. I just, in good conscience, can't. I think Ole Miss is too much. I think it's a victory in and of itself if the game is within reach for Wake Forest in the third quarter. I think Wake Forest kind of, if they keep this close, it'll be because they've kind of played it like an FCS team where they'll have limited possessions, kind of slowed the game down, slowed the pace down, and Wake wants to go fast on offense. So it's something that kind of has to happen out of character for Wake to kind of be in this game and make it interesting.
Connor, great stuff. I really enjoyed talking to you. I look forward to seeing you on Saturday, weather permitting, I guess, in Winston-Salem. Thanks.
Thanks, Neil. I appreciate it.
Ben Mintz, Barstool Sports, joins us as he does each and every week here on MPW Digital Extra. Ben, how are you?
Doing good. Excited. We're heading to week 2 NFL, week 3 of college, and just the thing is, you wait all summer on football season, but then right when it hits and the NFL gets going, it's just it's overwhelming in a good way. So
let's start with
feeling good.
Let's start with the biggest story in sports last weekend. Ruston High School knocks off Acadiana, whoever.
Acadiana.
Somebody walked in there and was like, hey, we're going to take on the Bearcats, and they just got humbled because that's what happens. You were there at RHS. Don't get emotional about it, but just kind of tell me.
Oh, no, it was fun, man. I tell you what, man, Ruston, they won the 5A state championship last year, and they were number 55 in max preps in the season going into the year. Acadiana was like number 5 in 5A, and Ruston's number 1. Ruston won 35-27. Super well played game. Ruston's got a dual threat quarterback who ran for 160 and threw for 200. It looked like Lamar Jackson out there. What's cool about the Ruston thing right now is Kyle Williams, the old LSU and Bills defensive line legend. He's the defensive coordinator for him. He doesn't even get paid by the school. He just does it because he loves it. And man, having him there, they got a great coaching staff, and it was really fun. I mean, I'll be honest. Even when I'm in Chicago or New York or whatever, I miss being around high school Friday nights. Man, I love. Used to love calling games in Louisiana, and I grew up on it, just being around it, and so I had a lot of fun checking that out last week. It was a great game.
Did they have the big statue dedicated to former Mr. Rustin high schools? Did you see that?
I didn't see it if they did, but it was they got brand new turf. They got super nice turf now.
Yeah, they probably I keep asking people if they saw the statue, and they must keep bringing it back inside to polish it and get it perfect. That must be all it is.
Well, they got a new 2023 5A state championship banner up. I can tell you that. So yeah, they're doing really well. And I just, like I said, man, just something about being around high school, growing up. It's like a romantic thing almost in a way. It's like football before all the, everything hits with the money and everything.
Yeah, boy, it hits with the money.
That's for sure.
That's for sure. All right, let's get into some college games. You did well with some games last week. You had a couple of disasters. I did too. I get it. The Kentucky disaster was one that.
Oh, dude, that Brock Vandergrift thing, man. That dude's had more recruiting stars than completed passes. He was a 5-star high school kid, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Dude completes 4 forward passes in a college football game. I mean, wow. I was mad at myself too because I thought about taking the under there, and I took Kentucky and I always talk about this. You don't like laying a lot of points in a low-scoring over-under because the margins are too thin. And so I made a mistake on that one, and, I'll admit it. Hey, Neil, ULM was sick, though. That money line on ULM, 32-6 outright winner, over plus 300 money line, plus 11. So that made up for it. So far, I'm doing well in college so far for the year. I'm like 14-7 plus 8 units. I'm down about 4 units in NFL so far, but more good than that.
All right, let's launch into this week's games. There's a Thursday night game that I'm actually kind of interested in. Arizona State -2 at Texas State. Texas State coming off of a dominant win. Their coach starting to get some real buzz as a rising star in the business. I think we talked about Texas State a little bit last week. It's an interesting spot here. I got to think this is a big game for them.
Yeah, it's one of those spots I'd never take Arizona State here because, Texas State, them getting a Big 12 school coming in to San Marcos on a Thursday night. This is like a Super Bowl situation for them. So it's stupid to take a road favorite laying 2. I am a believer in Kenny Dillingham. I know Arizona State. I had Arizona State against Mississippi State last week and hit. So this is it's a stay away over Texas State. But I'm not sure I know. I like that Arizona State coach a lot, so I'm not sure I want to go against them. But if I do make a play, it's Texas State, but not a strong opinion.
Couple of decent Friday night games. UNLV +7 at Kansas. Arizona +7.5 at Kansas State. Big night in the state of Kansas with a couple of interesting road dogs coming in. Barry Odom's done a hell of a job at UNLV.
Yeah, that one's a weird one. So Kansas lost as a 4-point road favorite at Illinois last week, and they lost that offensive coordinator that was really good to Penn State. I don't know how big of a loss that is. So in UNLV, they were really impressive, dominating in Houston week 1. Odom's doing a good job. So that's one I don't have a super strong read on. The other game, I got a strong opinion. I watched Arizona, New Mexico 2 weeks ago. They beat them 61-39. It was like a close game at half. Then Arizona beats Northern Arizona 22-10 last week. Arizona lost their coach, Jeff Fish, to Washington last offseason when DeBoer went to Bama. And they replaced him with Brent Brennan, who's was the San Jose coach, who was real underwhelming. He literally just got the job because he was an Arizona guy. And I watched that team. They have a good quarterback in Fafita, and McMillan's an elite receiver, and everything else on their team sucks. And I think they're going to Kansas State in a bad spot. Kansas State really had a mirror image game of the old, I felt like I was watching the Ole Miss Tulane game from week 2, part 2, where Tulane jumped them in the first half and the quarterback was hot, and Kansas State made some adjustments, ended up winning 34-27. But it was very similar to the Ole Miss Tulane game last year. And it was kind of a survive and advance situation, 11 a.m., NOLA, trap thing. And now you're going back home against a ranked team that's not very good. Kansas State's quarterback, Avery Johnson, he's mobile. He's a pretty big recruit. He hadn't been the most accurate throwing the ball so far this year. But, man, I think Kansas State might win by 14-21 here, and I got a pretty strong opinion on them. Trying to get that number at 7, not 7.5, though, if possible, because the only concern I have about K-State is how consistent is he throwing the ball. But I just think Arizona's bad. I don't think they're good, and I think they're going to fall off pretty hard, and this is a good spot to go against them.
All right, let's get into some Saturday games. Got a Big Ten SEC showdown in Madison. Alabama goes to play Wisconsin. The Tide, a 16-point favorite. I mean,
yeah, this one, okay. So my thing on this game is Wisconsin will be fired up to play Bama, but I just don't see how Wisconsin can score. I mean, there's never been a dumber. Everybody thought, including me, thought so highly of the Luke Fickell hire from Cincinnati. And then he goes to Wisconsin. It's like, what we're going to do at Wisconsin where we have all these great linemen and this power running game tradition? We're going to run the air raid. Like, what the hell are you doing? You're in Wisconsin. You think these kids are going to want to come to Madison, Wisconsin to run the air raid in 20-degree weather in November? And you really, go against your identity as a school. And then Phil Longo is up there calling plays, which we all remember from the Ole Miss days. And then, you get Tyler Van Dyke, and he's going to save it when you don't have athletes. They're not going to be able to move the ball. Their defense might fight hard because they're going to be fired up at home to keep them in it. The over-under is 50, so it makes me kind of lean under. But if you can find, this is a specific bet, Wisconsin's team total will either be 16.5, 17, or 17.5 based on the line. If it's 17 or 17.5, slam the under. I just don't see how they're going to be able to score in this game. I mean, they're barely scoring against Western Michigan. So, but, if I had a lean, it would be under, but I like the Wisconsin under team total.
all right, help me with this game. LSU at South Carolina. The Gamecocks getting 7 at home after an impressive win on their part. Everyone keeps talking about how bad Kentucky was, and I'm like, they were really bad. But Carolina played well in a spot where a lot of people are like, hey, Carolina's in trouble, Beamer's in trouble, week 2, blah, blah, blah. They played well in Lexington. They get a 31-6 win. Now they come home with some momentum, an opportunity to get a huge win, Akron, and then a week off before Ole Miss comes in there. I mean, there is a scenario where they have real momentum, but it includes having to beat LSU. And this is a big spot for LSU because an LSU loss, and the season's kind of over in the middle of September.
Yeah, and we also got to bring this up right now. This hurricane that's hitting South Louisiana is brutal for both LSU and Tulane because the amount of logistics and problems when you're dealing with family and travel, that stuff is no joke. That is not good for LSU going on the road laying 7 here. You're also dealing with a really bad weather report. I actually went and checked the weather because I'm more, with all the hurricane lingering around the southeast. I went through the weather before we got on this Zoom. And it's going to be raining like hell in South Carolina Saturday morning. And I think that favors the Gamecocks. You look at LSU, the first couple of weeks, the only thing that's looked good is Nuss in the passing game. The running game hadn't been good. The defense hadn't been good. The Nicholls State running back Guggenheim had like 130 and 2 touchdowns, was running all over them. If this is a bad weather game and it's mucked up, that's not good for LSU. I think they're extremely vulnerable here. I definitely would lean South Carolina +7. I think there's a lot of worlds where LSU pulls out a close game, but South Carolina historically, the thing with them, and I talked about it 2 weeks ago with the Old Dominion thing, they play down to G5 teams, but they pull an upset or two at SEC games in Columbia every year. That crowd's going to be hyped up. They got game day. And LSU's got, there's a lot of problems on that team. They also lost Jacoby Guillory, they were already really thin at D-line, and now he's out for the year. I don't know, man. This LSU thing, it just, I don't know. You look at it right now, there's not a lot. There's a lot of problems with that football team. I do think Nussmeier's a good quarterback, and they got good receivers, but that's really the only thing I'm seeing on their team that's scary right now. So I lean South Carolina +7 in the spot. Maybe I feel like it's going to be a close game. And if it's the more rain, South Carolina's trying to let's also mention Rocket Sanders, the old Arkansas running back. Was hurt last year, but had a huge year 2 years ago. He's back at South Carolina. This is a rainy, muddy game. That LSU run defense looked like crap last week against Nicholls State, so he could have a big game. So, I'm leaning the Gamecocks here. The points.
Okay. You might even like the South Carolina money line a little bit is what I hear.
Yeah, a little bit. I don't know. This hurricane thing, there's a lot that doesn't feel right about LSU right now. They're vulnerable here.
A lot doesn't feel right about Florida State, and they get Memphis this weekend. They're only a 6.5-point favorite at home against the Tigers. This would be obviously a huge spot for Memphis going up against their former coach.
Yeah, I love Memphis in this game. The only thing is I'm watching the weather report, and I feel like Memphis has like such a good passing game. Their quarterback's like a fourth-year starter. They got athletes everywhere. I said before the season they're the best G5 team. Obviously they crushed some no-name like Northern Alabama, and then they crushed Troy last week. Troy's really fallen off though. But no, I think Memphis has a good chance to win this game. I would prefer it to not be like rainy, like mucked up. But Florida State's not going to have a home field advantage at 11 a.m. here at 0-2. I mean, their fan base is not going to be hyped up. Playing Memphis ain't going to excite them. And dude, Memphis is damn good. I mean, they always send a lot of athletes to the NFL. And like I said, I like that quarterback, and I know they're going to be fired up. So I'm taking Memphis in the points here, and I'm probably going to throw the money line in some parlays.
Okay. All right. A game that's not getting much hype. Boston College off to a good start. They beat Florida State. They're 2-0. They go to Missouri. They are 16.5-point underdogs in Como. It's an 11:45 game on SEC Network. What do you see here?
I mean, I like the points here again because, look, I don't know if Boston College can win this game because, obviously with Cook and Luther Burden, Missouri's not an elite passing game. But, man, BC, Bill O'Brien, I mean, you saw the way they looked at Florida State. They're well coached. And you got Thomas Castellanos, dual threat quarterback. You got the Ward kid from Florida State, the running back transfer. They can run. This is an exact spot. There's something real interesting in college football right now. So since the clock doesn't stop on first downs anymore, you can shorten these games if you can run the ball. And you saw that's what Georgia Tech and BC did to Florida State. And you don't see these 4.5-hour games anymore. And so BC, it favors unders and it favors underdogs. And I think BC might be able to play keep away here a little bit, keep cooking them on the sideline. And I like them in the 17. I just think they're gonna fight, and they're well coached. And on the Missouri defensive end, they lost Blake Baker, the defensive coordinator at LSU, and they lost a first-round D lineman, Darius Robinson, and 3 guys in the secondary to the NFL. I know their defense has shut out 2 crappy teams so far, but I still think they're unproven. And I like the points here, man. I'm taking the points here.
Speaking of points, Tulane gets 13 at Oklahoma. Oklahoma struggled mightily at home before holding off Houston. Tulane, we talked about their game against Kansas State. Green Wave get 13 in Norman.
So 3 years ago, Tulane was getting blown out at half and came back and lost like 45-42 in Norman. But, man, at first my instincts like Tulane, but, man, like I said, the hurricane thing concerns me. The way that game ended last week, and then Oklahoma had a horrible effort winning 16-12 over Houston, which made me happy because I was leading the charge on Oklahoma being 6-6 this year and it being bad. But having said all that, I mean, I'm Tulane or nothing, but there's just a lot going against Tulane this week. And so that has me a little concerned. I'm probably not going to play it just because, like I said, just the way that game ended last week and the hurricane thing's tough. But I don't know, man. Oklahoma doesn't look very good. Temple, they look good week 1 because Temple barely can field a football team. But 16 points at home against Houston. I mean, I don't see how you're excited. That's not good for the Sooners.
Texas A&M heads to Florida, and kind of a huge game for both coaches. I mean, look, Mike Elko's fine. It's year 1, but he doesn't want to start off with 2 losses in September. Looking at the rest of their schedule, there's some more L's potentially if that happens. And then obviously the Billy Napier thing, he needs a win so bad. Florida getting 3.5 at home.
I'm real curious to see. So, did you follow the Florida quarterback situations in flux? Because DJ Lagway is like a 5-star freshman, and he came in and was chunking it against Samford last week. So, the old when you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none concerns me because now you got a little quarterback controversy there. But having said that, there ain't no way in hell I'm laying 3.5 points on the road with A&M in the swamp. I mean, I'm Florida or nothing. Also, I think it's like 50% chance of rain here, so maybe be on the lookout for that because that could affect Gainesville and Tallahassee for Memphis, Florida State. But I'm Florida or nothing in this game. I know I'm not. I can't take A&M laying 3.5 points on the road with the way their offense looks. And it's like one of those things. You know how bad Napier needs it, but like, is he a good coach and do they have talent? You can need a game all you want, but I mean, are they any good? But I still think I might end up on Florida here.
Little curious why this line's where it is. I would have thought the Arkansas line against UAB would be higher. It's 24.5. UAB was awful in Monroe. Arkansas actually was pretty good in Stillwater when they weren't taking a gun and shooting themselves in the foot. They get a home opener in Fayetteville. This feels like a blowout spot for Arkansas, but 24.5 is kind of an interesting number there.
Yeah, it is. And one last point on A&M, I forgot to mention. A&M hadn't won a road game since October of 2021 at Missouri. So that's another reason to not trust them in the swamp. Yeah, this game, Arkansas should blow them out. I feel like Petrino, the offense looks better than I expected with the Boise transfer quarterback who's mobile. They look like they got the running game going. That Jackson kid, the running back from Utah transfer, is looking really, really good. And, man, I think UAB, I mean, if you're getting beat 32-6 in Malone Stadium, I mean, that's not good. So I know Arkansas might have a little bit of a hangover after what happened in the second half, but I think they can score points and they should cover.
Yeah, I've been saying for a minute this week that if I'm Arkansas, I'm handling business this week and building some confidence because I think they've got a real shot the next couple of weeks. They get Auburn and Texas A&M the next 2 weeks. I think they're both winnable games.
No, I do too. And Arkansas, look, I know that they shot themselves in the foot, but they're definitely better than we expected them to be. I mean, Petrino's still a good offensive coordinator, and the offense looks pretty good. And then UAB, I mean, if you score 6 at ULM, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. It's not good.
All right, Ole Miss heads to Wake Forest. It's a 5:30 Central game, 6:30 there in Winston-Salem. The Rebels giving 23.5 to a Wake Forest team that blew a 2-score lead at home against Virginia in the fourth quarter this past Saturday.
I mean, look, Bachmeier, that quarterback for Wake, threw for like 400 last week. He's an old boy. He actually played at Boise and was at Louisiana Tech last year in Ruston, so he's on quite the tour. Look, they're not going to be able to run the ball against Ole Miss's front. I'm sure of that. If they're going to be able to do anything, they might be able to throw like a little bit, but they don't really have the skill guys. Wake had a good team 2 years ago with Sam Hartman when they made the ACC championship and lost to Kenny Pickett in Pittsburgh. But I don't think the NIL world is being very kind to Wake Forest. And their talent level, I think Clawson's a good coach, but their talent level, it's just not there. And the thing we've talked about a lot with Ole Miss under Lane Kiffin, they beat the crap out of bad teams. I mean, that's Lane comes in and takes care of business in these spots a lot. I'm Ole Miss or nothing. I'm also watching the weather report a little bit because it could be rainy up there. And, obviously if it's pouring down rain, I don't love laying the 23.5. But, I don't see this being any kind of a problem for Ole Miss, but like you could win 38-17 and not cover kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm looking at the Winston-Salem forecast as of right now. They're kind of taking the rain out of there. It's a high of 78, 24% chance of rain. Because I think Francine is going more straight north than she is going northeast.
Okay. Well, that might affect Arkansas a little bit, but okay. And Missouri, I wonder Missouri too. Ooh, hey, by the way, if it's raining in Missouri, I hadn't checked that weather report. If it's bad weather in Missouri, load up on South Carolina even more with that running game because that's not going to be good for Missouri in that passing game at all. That'll really help BC.
Load up on Boston College. Okay, you said South Carolina. I was a little confused.
Yeah. No, I meant BC. Give me that. Load up on BC and maybe even if it's pouring down rain, I'll add that money line at 5%.
Yeah, I just pulled up the Fayetteville forecast. As of right now, high of 87, just a 9% chance of rain. So okay. Vanderbilt. Heading for 3-0 if they can go to Georgia State and win. They're giving 10.5 points.
Man, I'll tell you what, it's amazing to me what having a quarterback can do. Diego Pavia was really good at New Mexico State. He's come in and changed that whole energy. They made such a good hire bringing Jerry Kill, who's the New Mexico State head coach, onto that staff. It feels like that was a package deal. They look pretty good. I mean, I know Alcorn State's nothing. I still don't – when I see Vanderbilt laying over 10, double digits on the road, I just have trouble hitting submit. It's just not something I can do easily, but I think they're not that bad. And I don't think Georgia State's anything special, but I'm going to stay away from this game.
I was just fixing – I noticed in my picks I had Georgia Southern because Georgia Southern comes to Ole Miss next week, so I've had Georgia Southern in the back of my mind.
Brandon Walker really likes Vandy this week, by the way. He was talking about it this morning.
Is that good or bad?
He knows college football pretty good. I mean, he'll find some kind of – he was all over Vandy against Virginia Tech 2 weeks ago. He got me on it, so I got to give him some credit on that. He'll on his college football stuff, I'm trying to be more selective too. The biggest mistake you can make is betting 11, 12 games, and so I'm trying to get it down to like 4 to 6 to where I'm like selective and aggressive, and he does a good job of
that. Let's see. Texas. I'm sorry. Screw Texas. Georgia given 24 at Kentucky. This feels like a small number. Like I almost would think about laying 34.
Yeah, I don't see how Kentucky can score. I mean, you're going to try to run the ball right at Georgia in that run D, and you got a quarterback that can't complete forward passes. And he also, not just could he not throw, he looked legitimately scared out there. He looked like a deer in headlights in that game. I mean, you could see it watching the game. The only thing on this one, maybe I'm looking at under. I know it's not like the highest total, but do you remember the game 2 years ago there where Georgia beat them 16-6 with Stetson Bennett? I remember that. And so maybe there's a chance that, I know Carson Beck's better and really good, but, that's the only thing about laying 24 is, what if this is a 27-7 Georgia game where Kentucky's defense fights hard and kind of keeps them in it. So I think I kind of like the under maybe a little more than I like Kentucky because of that.
All right. Toledo, the line's up to 11.5. It was 9.5, but apparently a lot of money coming in on State. Can Toledo cover 11.5 against Mississippi State?
Man, so Toledo's quarterback, they had the MAC Player of the Year, Daquan Finn, but he's at Baylor now, and he's their quarterback. And the thing is, and I know you're a Sun Belt believer too, I trust the good Sun Belt teams to fight in the spot. But these MAC teams just don't have the athletes the Sun Belt has. And so, this long trip from Toledo, I mean, I'm staying away from this game. I don't trust them enough to take them.
If that's my phone dinging, I apologize. I can't figure.
No, it's mine, and I'm sorry. I got it on my computer.
I kept looking on mine. I was trying to find notifications. All right, let's see. About to get to some NFL.
Let me glance real quick, make sure. I might have one or two more. I'll make it real quick. Loving this DraftKings app. There, I think we said Bama, Wisconsin. All right. I'll make this super quick. Oregon State. Oregon by 16.5. I wouldn't lay 16.5 on the road in the game formerly known as Civil War. Sort of like Pittsburgh +2 in the backyard brawl at home. Pittsburgh's quarterback's Eli Holstein now, the 5-star from St. Thomas More in Lafayette. Went to Bama and then transferred to Pitt. He's thrown for over 300 yards the first two games. They actually have some athletes. So I kind of am looking at them as a home dog. Anyway, all right, that's all I got for college.
Yeah, big spot for Neil Brown, too. He needs a win badly. All right, NFL. Got a Thursday night game that's good. Buffalo at Miami. The Dolphins giving 2.5. They didn't cover the 3.5 against Jacksonville. Did win the game. Buffalo did not cover the 6.5 last week against Arizona, but they won the game as well. So 2 1-0 teams, AFC East. What do you think?
Man, this is a fun matchup. Luckily I got Miami down to 3 and pushed and got away with one on that one because I know I gave out Miami here. I was right on the Arizona one because I said that line looked weird. Something felt weird about it. Buffalo's in trouble on defense right now. Matt Milano, their star linebacker's out for the first half of the year. They lost 2 stud safeties in Jordan Hoyer and Micah Hyde, and they have another defensive injury. And I just think if you're that banged up on defense and Arizona's slicing you up, you're playing the wrong team on the road here in Miami with their speed. So I lean Miami in this game. I think it could get kind of – Thursday night games usually aren't shootouts, but Miami, with Chubb out, Jalen Phillips not healthy, they don't have the pass rush they used to have. So I could see this being higher scoring, but I'm taking Miami here. This is a revenge game from that Week 17 game where Buffalo beat them to win the AFC East title. So I kind of think the Dolphins should show up a little bit here.
All right, we get to Sunday. Raiders a 9-point dog already at Baltimore. The Ravens looking for a win. You got to think they'll get the win, but 9 points is a lot.
Yeah, this is one of those where I think the Ravens win fairly easily, but Gardner Minshew if there's ever a quarterback, he's the new Ryan Fitzpatrick. They're the same person. And I just worry about getting backdoor covered late. It's just so hard. Pro football, the edges are so small, man. Anytime you're laying over a touchdown, it's tough. But I do think Baltimore gets the win. The Raiders didn't look great at the Chargers, but laying 9, I'm a little hesitant.
Interesting game. I know for you, for a lot of people in our audience, and then obviously the Cowboys are such a big brand. The Saints go to Dallas coming off a big win. Both teams coming off big wins. New Orleans getting 6.5 in Arlington.
Well, let's address the elephant in the room on me not respecting the Clint Kubiak hire enough of that underpick last week. Holy crap. I was saying before the year, if the Saints are going to be good, it's all because they found a young offensive wizard off the Shanahan tree. And it certainly looked like it. I know it's NFL and the Panthers stink, but man, all those Panthers-Saints games have all been ugly, low scoring till what I saw last Sunday. And he's doing a good job using Taysom Hill. Getting him and Kamara in there. And then when Shaheed's healthy to complement Olave, you got some serious weapons. The Saints are dealing with the hurricane thing this week, but I think they're already in Dallas, so I don't know that it'll affect them as much as it affects LSU or Tulane. Curious here, the Saints got to run the ball, and because of the pass rush that Dallas has, you got to avoid the 3rd and 12s because I'm still worried about Penning at right tackle and Lucas Patrick at left guard. So I think this is a situation where I'm going to sit back and watch it and just enjoy this game. And if the Saints fight hard and lose, I think that's fine. But I just gave you a long speech with no real play here. It's 45.5. Dallas games actually tend to get higher scoring at home. Usually they get a little wilder.
Yeah, I don't hate the over. I don't hate the over at all.
No, I don't. And Marshawn Lattimore with the minor hamstring injury, if he's out, that ain't good against CeeDee Lamb. So that's something to watch too.
Niners and the Vikings in Minnesota. The Vikings a 6-point home dog against the Niners team that looked awfully good on Monday night, but now has to travel and play on a short week. This
one feels like maybe the rat one of the week. I know it's crazy. The Niners looked dominant on Monday, and Jordan Mason, man, it looks like they found this McCaffrey situation is real tough if you're in fantasy football. But I think the Vikings Darnold looked really good last week. I know the Giants stink, but he opened up 10 of 10 for 135. Minnesota at home, I don't know. I'm Minnesota or nothing. I feel like the Niners are going to be like this really public sucker side this week. And I always say this. When you look, you never are as good or as bad as you look on Sunday or Monday Night Football. When you dominate on Monday Night Football, everybody sees it. Everybody's going to be like, oh, the Niners are only 6. They'll handle them. So I kind of think that, Minnesota's the right side here, kind of on the fade. And I think Darnold, I don't think he's like a lead or anything, but I think under Kevin O'Connell, who's a super underrated play caller, I think the Vikings will fight here, and I think Justin Jefferson might have a hell of a game.
All right, here's a game that I like, and I'm trying to
maybe over in that game, by the way. It's 46. I think it could be maybe higher scoring.
I'm trying to talk myself out of this because I know there's some recency bias. I watched the Chargers over the weekend. I liked what I saw. They're tough. They already have an identity. He's a good coach. I know he's weird as hell. I get it. He's a good coach. Herbert's a good quarterback. They have a good team. The Panthers look awful. Just awful. I don't believe in Bryce Young. I'll be the first to tell you. I don't believe in him. But it's 6.5 points for the Chargers on the road as a road favorite. Feels like a ton of points, but I don't see how they lose to Carolina.
No, I don't think they'll lose. I like under in it. It's like 38.5, which is lower. But I think the Chargers, we saw last week what they're going to be. They're going to run the ball. They're going to play defense. They lost Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. They're not going to be explosive on offense. And as you said, Bryce Young's terrible. So I'm gonna go under here instead of taking the Chargers. But I think the Chargers do win the game. But I'm on this under.
Whew, such a small number. Colts at Packers. The Colts giving 3 on the road against Green Bay, almost certainly playing without Jordan Love.
Yeah, Malik Willis is their quarterback. Did y'all watch him play? He started a few games for the Titans a couple of years ago. He can't complete passes. He was throwing for 90 yards a game. Because of that, Green Bay's going to run the ball. And I think Indianapolis is going to run the ball too with Jonathan Taylor. And I will be taking under 40.5 points in a game that Malik Willis starts at quarterback in pro football.
I like that one. I like that one a bunch. I agree.
They're there. I'm telling you, he can't throw, and so they're going to run the ball, and that's all they're going to be able to do.
The Jets. Speaking of the Titans, the Jets go to Tennessee to play a Titans team that literally gave a game away in the NFL. Just gave it away here. It's a present. Merry Christmas to the Bears. Titans getting 3.5 at home against the Jets. Jets.
Man, I don't really have too much thoughts on this one. To be honest, I just can't lay 3.5 on the road with the Jets yet. I thought Rodgers made a couple of good plays, but wasn't very consistent. Didn't really look that comfortable in the pocket. Levis played a lot better at home last year than on the road, though. His home road splits were kind of jarring. So, I'm Titans if anything, but I'm going to stay away from this one.
Okay. I tend to agree. I don't like that game at all. Seahawks go to New England. New England getting 3.5 at home, coming off the win over Cincinnati. Seattle, a 3.5 point home dog flying across the country.
This was it's another low over under, but man, I just don't see how you don't bet unders in Patriots games till it doesn't work out. They have no weapons. Brissett can't really throw. They're just trying to run with their Ramondre Stevenson. They do have a good defense. The Seattle thing last week, the defense looked great, but they also played Bo Nix, who looked terrible. So it's hard to analyze. Was the Seattle defense better or
Or the Patriots?
Hey, hang on. Hey, PFT, hang on just a second, Neil. What's up, PFT?
Hey, Mister, you're not in the office today, right?
Yeah, I'm here.
So we got another NFC game. This is probably maybe a playoff preview. I think the Buccaneers are the favorites in the South. The Lions 1-0, the favorites in the North. It's in Detroit. Detroit coming off that emotional Sunday night win. They're giving 7 to Tampa.
Man, this was they beat them 31-24 in the playoffs this year, and this line's 7, and it's 52.5. I thought Detroit's defense did look a little better with the revamped secondary, even if Stafford had a good second half. I think they upgraded the talent level. Baker looked good week 1, he especially on third down, throwing it to Evans. Long story. I'm sitting back and watching this one. I mean, I'm giving you some speech where I have literally no opinion. The one opinion I do have, Jamison Williams is a stud, and bet his over props. I hit him at 11-1 to have 90. He had 117 yards. I had him over 89.5 yards, 11.5 to 1. Look out for him to keep killing it. He's in his third year now. He was awesome at Bama, but he had a torn ACL his first year. He had a gambling scandal, and he's finally getting it together.
All right. Not a good game, but maybe an interesting bet. The Giants getting 1.5 at Washington. Washington -1.5 feels awfully appealing right here.
Yeah, look, I'm going to keep this short and sweet. I think Jaden Daniels is good at quarterback and Daniel Jones isn't. Washington will be fired up for Daniels' first-time game. I'm going to take Washington here.
Okay. Cleveland is at Jacksonville. The Jags coming off a narrow loss, giving 3 points to a Browns team that looked lost.
Yeah, the biggest thing on this one is if Jacksonville's if Cleveland's tackles are out again, I'm taking Jacksonville because they couldn't block Dallas last week with Micah Parsons and them. And if Jacksonville's got a good pass rush with Josh Allen and Walker, and so if Cleveland's got offensive line guys out, I'm taking Jacksonville. But if those guys are back, I'm staying away.
All right, Rams +1 at Arizona.
Like the Rams, Sean McVay's never lost to the Cardinals. I don't know how Arizona's favored in this game. It's crazy. I mean, McVay beats them twice every single year. You go look up his record. I thought Stafford's game Sunday night was just unbelievably heroic, and it was kind of a tragedy he didn't get to win with the way he brought them back. And I think Cooper Kupp is back. So the Rams do have some O-line injuries, which concern me. That left tackle situation looks bad, but I still think they get it done.
No idea why this line's only 5. The Bengals a 5-point dog, 5-point favorite. 5-point underdog at Kansas City. Chiefs laying 5. Feels like the Chiefs should be laying.
Yeah, I know it looks ratty, but I still like KC because Cincinnati. We've seen this from the last few years. They're never ready at the start of the season. No. It's weird. They lost 31-0 at Cleveland last year. You saw that effort at home against New England. T. Higgins is hurt. Chase has contract stuff. And the thing about this game, this means a lot to the Chiefs because the Bengals beat them in that AFC they played 2 AFC championship games, 1-1. The Bengals are 2-0 at home in the games in the regular season. So there's kind of a little bit of a rivalry, the whole Burrowhead and all that. So I like KC, and I think Isaiah Pacheco has a really big game because the Bengals' run defense isn't that good, and they have a pretty good pass team.
Pittsburgh heads to Denver. The Steelers doing what the Steelers do. This time they're a road favorite, giving 2.5 to Denver.
The over-under's down to 36.5, and I still like the under. I mean, Knicks looked terrible against Seattle. I think Fields is going to go here again. I mean, he's very limited throwing the ball. The problem here with taking Pittsburgh, I was on Pittsburgh against Atlanta. But, man, Mike Tomlin, when he's an underdog, he's the best, but he screws up games like this when they're favored on the road. He does this a couple times a year. So I feel like Pittsburgh might be a little trappy, but I'm going to take the under. And if Bo Nix goes out after what I saw last week and plays good, then, God bless him, because that was – if you watched any of that thing last week, that was one of the worst efforts I've ever seen from a quarterback in the NFL. I mean, it was very hard to watch. It was jarring.
Sunday night game that I like a lot. I love Houston -6 at home against the Bears. I know the Bears won the game, but offensively they're nowhere close to ready.
Yeah, and they're playing the wrong team to not be able to score because C.J. Stroud, Houston, Waddell, Diggs, and Nico Collins, they're going to score points. I agree with you. Chicago got away with murder in that game last week. I mean, I saw Callahan, the Titans coach, said if we just punted on 1st and 10 in the second half, we'd have won this game. And I got to see more from Caleb Williams to keep up. Dunze, the Bears receiver's out too, which doesn't help them. So I'm on Houston too.
In the Monday night game, the Falcons go to Philly. Philly giving 6.5 to Atlanta.
The Cousins didn't look right last week. He's coming off a torn Achilles. He wasn't really pushing off. He's hurt.
Yeah.
And Philly looks back. I mean, Saquon Barkley looks like a good addition. They added Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, coordinator. I know Philly's probably going to be kind of public here, but I think they roll. I think Atlanta, the Cousins thing. Honestly, if Cousins doesn't start playing better, we might see Michael Penix in a couple weeks. I wouldn't even be shocked, to be honest.
Big plans this weekend?
Chilling up here in Chicago, Illinois. I'm putting the traveling to rest the next few weeks. I'm a maybe on Ole Miss, Kentucky. Definitely doing Ole Miss, LSU in Baton Rouge, Georgia, and the Egg Bowl. But, man, I'm going to sit up here. We have big gambling streams all day watching NFL Sunday. We got weather's great in September in Chicago. So it's time to save some money, win some bets, and then, we're going to have a big October to the end of the year. So that's all I got.
Benjamin.
I have Cooper Manning on my show tomorrow. I'm pumped about that.
Okay. As always, man, appreciate the time. Talk to you soon. Thanks to all of our guests here on MPW Digital Extra, presented by Rustic Revivals Furniture Company. Thanks to all of them for making another week possible here on the network. So, again, Michael Bratton, Connor O'Neill, Ben Mintz, all thanks for their time. A lot of programming coming your way the rest of the day here on MPW Digital, from the Butcher versus the Dance Instructor to Pete's Pigskin Preview, Hand Raise Guys, all of that coming your way here today. And then all of this will be in podcast form on Friday. If you're making the drive to Winston-Salem, please be careful and hope you enjoy the programming. Leave a review, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We would appreciate all of those things very, very much. We'll have post-game, actually in-game and post-game coverage on MPW Digital and rebelgrove.com from Winston-Salem, Ole Miss, and Wake Forest. 5:30 Central, 6:30 Eastern on Saturday. And then, of course, next week, a complete new week of coverage here at MPW Digital. Again, thank you very much. Enjoy the day. Enjoy your weekend. If you're driving, drive carefully, and we'll see you again